Everyone, and welcome to the August 16th meeting of the Morro Bay Planning Commission. We have a full quorum, and we will start the meeting with a moment of silence. Thank you very much. Next up, Planning Commissioner announcements. Do we have anything? Nothing from any of the commissioners. At this time, we move on to public comment. This is the time to comment on things not on the agenda. We will have time in short order for things that are on the agenda. Hi, Martha. Sometimes people do announcements. So anybody in the audience have any public comment for items not on the agenda? Welcome.
Hey. A couple items, and the reason I haven't been here before with COVID and I don't Zoom much. But I wanted to talk about two items. I just recently read that you're thinking about an ordinance to ban natural gas in Morro Bay as far as new construction, but also for remodeling. I think new construction makes all the sense. A remodel is very, very expensive to rip out your old appliances and put in, if the article was right, it said if you do flooring or drywall, it's required. And electric to heat a house is very expensive, and it takes natural gas right now to power and make electricity. So it's almost sliding backwards to actually, force existing residences. Maybe a better thing would be for remodels to do an offset by requiring solar panels or something of that nature. But that was just a thought on that subject. The other is on the location of the battery plant at the old PG&E site. When I came to Morro Bay, I came here about over 50 years ago. And at that time, people were going, can you believe they sited a power plant right on the bay in that location? What were the people thinking? And of course, back then, it was in the late 50s, everyone understood. But here we are, fast forward 2022, and we're talking about supersizing 40-foot buildings, 20 acres next to a high school, right on prime oceanfront. And so I think it's the right project with the wrong location. I think just early on, I have friends in the solar industry. They say this battery plant can be put any place under a high power line. It doesn't have to be in this location. You could put it on the Tri-W property. You could put it over by the wastewater treatment plant. Morro Bay has 150 acres inside the city limits, Tri-W. So there's other really better locations, and you could possibly do a trade-off to better use the existing PG&E or the, I guess it's Vistra now property. And so that was the other thing I wanted to bring up is great project, wrong location, and there's other locations that are available just outside of the real sensitive zones. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martini. Any other public comment for items not on the agenda in the audience? Anthony, do we have anybody waiting to Zoom in on public comment or call in?
Thank you, Chair Stewart. Currently, I do not see any raised hands in the queue.
All right, thank you. We'll close public comment then and move along to the consent calendar. We have two items on there in terms of our minutes and then the current and advanced planning and processing list. Anybody need to pull anything on that? Looks like we're good. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve minutes and consent calendar.
Thank you. Second?
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion from Mike and a second from Joe. Who wants to call that one? Scott?
Yes.
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 Yes. Thank you. All right, so we're moving on to our public hearings. We have a special guest here, Martha, good to see you again. And who's going to take it away? Cindy going to do it? Scott?
Yeah, just let me get our presentation up here and
Perfect.
and we'll get going.
Chair Stewart?
Yes.
Is it maybe an advantage to talk about how we're going to structure this complex meeting?
I think what we're going to do is have our presentation, as usual, by staff. I think we could have limited questions, very specific questions from commissioners, and then I'd like to be sure we get it open to public comment. Take note of the various public comments, and then I would like to go back and address the 10 major changes. I think a lot of, at least the written comment that we've heard, fell into those guidelines. Just to let everybody know out there, we are likely to have 2 meetings on this. So if we aren't able to address or respond to your specific concerns or comments tonight, we will do it at the next meeting that addresses this. And just so you know, all of you out there who have written in and, or maybe bringing more to the table, your comments and concerns and questions have been fabulous. It really helps us see what the public is concerned about and interested in and how to focus what we're looking at in this. I really appreciate all of that energy that you folks put into this. So if that is...
I'm going to offer a slight change to that, see what you all think. Presentation and then small comments from us where we maybe select the top 10 items for tonight based on the top 10 we got from staff and based on all the really strong comments we got. I think there was an overwhelming preference for certain items. My hope would be if we want to address the 10 items tonight, we could limit each item preliminarily, one meeting, to a 15-minute time period.
That sounds great.
And
because
then
even that gives us quite
That's
a number
still
of
a long,
hours.
long night, and we might do better. One of the things we could do, so it's more, I think, immediate, is we could hold public comment for each item. So rather than ganging it all at the front, we would ask folks to talk around the item. Let's say it's the fence issue. And so we would ask for comment, and we would ask if they could help us to limit public comment to a 5-minute period by oftentimes trying to stand up and talk, but not repeat what someone has previously said.
Sure.
So that way we can get through it. Tonight is the first pass.
So my immediate response to that, number one, there is a 3-minute time limit on public comment. So each person will have 3 minutes to comment. I really agree that if you've heard somebody already give the comment that you had to come forward and say, I agree with so-and-so, second that. The other thing we often do that's helpful is if you in the audience hear something that you agree with, wave your hand. We try not to vocalize because that can be really distracting, but just waving your hand if you agree with something can be really helpful. The other thing, though, I would respond that could potentially have people staying here for a long evening. And I think what I've seen in the past with the public is I think they like to be able to get their comments out and heard and go home. So I would be more inclined to just go ahead with the public comment, and we will keep track and keep notes on what folks are saying. If you want to stay for the whole meeting, you're welcome, and then go ahead and address those 10 items that the staff put forward as the major changes, and anything, we may be able to shift those items rather than doing them in the order they're given, do them in the order that.
So here's an alternate consideration.
Okay.
After we do the 10 items, we could have public comment based on anything that we didn't have on the 10, so people still get the chance to speak to it. And if someone wants to leave, they could speak on any item they want. What might be good about doing public comment before each item is it gives us better focus. And I found that that really allows the conversation to be clean and clear and more precise. It's very hard sometimes for speakers to get 5 or 6 items out in 3 minutes. This would allow them, I think, more focused response. And if they're going to stay here, that would be great. If they're not, they can do it early on in the meeting.
So you're suggesting people could have more than one opportunity for
Oh, they
public
could
comment?
speak every time on every item, yeah.
And Susan, just as a comment, because of the nature of what we're dealing with, I think I agree with Bill that we should be more open and iterative,
Yeah.
right? Because we need to be more efficient. Because if we have people talking about one thing and then jumping to the 10th thing and then coming back to the second thing, coming back to the fourth, we might want to be more productive by talking about top 10 and then our top 10 and then letting public comment anytime they want to on any item. And if they're interested, they're going to stay. They're not going to leave.
I'm not sure that's going to make it more efficient.
Well, I was just looking at because I know Scott believes in being iterative,
Scott,
right?
do you have any opinion?
I mean, how you want to conduct the meeting is certainly up to the commission. I'm not going to dictate that to you. I think the normal process, this is what you discussed initially, Chair Stewart. Being more focused is not an issue. I know we even received correspondence from the public asking whether there was going to be more than one opportunity to speak. I think Ms. Winholtz made that comment back there. and recently we've provided opportunities related to some other engagement we've had with the community to do that. This certainly, that process certainly provides that. I don't know if it's faster or better, but it does provide the opportunity that was requested, and I would imagine not just Ms. Winholtz, but others want to probably speak to those. So that conversation would be good for the commission to have about like how you think that would work. Not advocating really for one or the other necessarily, just that I know that there's probably interest among the folks out there, and 3 minutes to speak to 10 items is not a lot of time.
My feeling is if we were going to make that change, I would reduce the amount of time, and that has been
Yeah,
done
I'm
before
saying 1
in
minute,
public
yeah.
meetings where we have large audiences. And so if you look at, we have, say, 20 or so people out there, there could be a potential for 200 minutes of comments, and that is a long.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly could do it to 1 minute. I could have the timer on it for 1 minute to speak to each one of those items, and then when you're done with the 10, we could go on and say, okay, does anybody in the audience have comments related to other things that aren't the 10? Because there is interest in other things that aren't the 10, but in the 10 are 4 pretty key ones that folks, or at least 3 that folks have been interested in.
That's the intent, yeah.
Joe, any opinion?
No, I'd like to try what Bill is suggesting,
Okay.
sort of see how well it works.
Asia? Neutral? Okay, and we know how Mike feels, and obviously. I'd say it's worth a try, but I think we need to limit people to 1 minute and comment on each item.
Okay.
So we will go ahead and start with.
So we have
Staff
a
report.
broad overview of kind of the whole process that we've gone to. Martha's going to give that, and then we have a break in the presentation that starts at the 10, so we can go to that first one and speak to that, and then go from there.
Sounds good.
All right, Martha?
All right. Thank you very much, Martha Miller. Happy to be back before you with this project and continue to work with the city on the zoning code and implementation plan update. So I'll give an overview of the project. Overall, it is a comprehensive update of your zoning code and your coastal implementation plan to be consistent and implement your general plan and your coastal land use plan, which is Plan Morro Bay. Promote high-quality design throughout the city, respond to community concerns, look at administrative processes, streamline the processes where appropriate, be consistent with state and federal law, and overall be easy to use and understand. We began the project some time ago, where we spent a lot of time on analysis and assessment of your current code, your current development context, what the issues were, and you were updating your general plan and coastal land use plan at the time. So that was a big diagnostic exercise of your current code and where you wanted to go with your new code. Then we started drafting the regulations, and as we did this, we broke the zoning code down into about 4 parts to facilitate the review of this fairly lengthy document. So we broke that down into 4 parts, did preliminary draft updated regulations for each of those, went through a public review process on each of those, both with the General Plan Advisory Council as well as the Planning Commission. So we went through that level of review, made revisions to each of those sections of the zoning code, packaged that all together into a complete review draft, and that was out for public review for a long time, and as well as kind of put a pin in that while the city went through the update of the coastal zone land use plan and the general plan, because we knew through that process there would be some things that came out that then affected the zoning code. So once that was certified, we went back, made updates to the draft zoning code and implementation plan that was reviewed, again, with the General Plan Advisory Committee, the Planning Commission. So we made revisions in response to what happened with the land use plan, additional input from the public, as well as things that kind of refinements that staff noticed as they started to test the code and see how that worked. So that brings us to where we are tonight as we begin the formal hearings and adoption process. So the zoning code and the implementation plan really has 5 main components. And this is a different organization than what your current code has, and it's really intended to group like provisions so that there's a more intuitive structure, organizational structure to your code, which is one of the main complaints of your current code is that it was hard to use, hard to understand, you didn't know where to look to find things. So I'll go through a kind of a summary of that new organizational structure. But one of the parts of it is also that your coastal implementation plan is part of the zoning code. And we clearly identified which sections of the zoning code make up that implementation plan. And that's important because currently your entire zoning code is part of your implementation plan, even the portions of the zoning code that aren't directly related to the production of coastal resources. So with the updated code and the implementation plan, it's clearly identified what is part of the coastal implementation plan and is subject to Coastal Commission review and certification, and which are the other parts of the code that are really city-specific and alone. So the first division, or the first part of the updated code, is the introductory provisions. And these really identify the authority that the city has in having a zoning code, the applicability of the standards, how it relates to the general plan, to your coastal land use plan. And it also includes some kind of reference material that aids in the implementation, the interpretation of the code. So those are how measurements are conducted, how language is constructed, how to make those interpretations. So those are the introductory provisions. The second division is the district regulations, and these are base and overlay districts which implement your general plan land use designations and policies within your general plan. So there's a set of base districts which include agricultural, your residential districts, commercial, industrial, public, semi-public, your waterfront and harbor area districts. And then there's a number of overlay districts that are kind of laid over these areas and have standards that are particular within those overlay areas. So that includes the Coastal Resource Protection Overlay District, which identifies where the coastal zone is. It also has the Cloisters Overlay District, which has a certain development approval for that area. So that points out that those regulations and limitations that apply. Mixed-use residential overlay district, which implements that mixed-use area in your general plan. The waterfront master plan, which really just identifies the applicability of that master plan to that area. And then planned development overlay district, which would be applied if a property went through a planned development approval, a specific approval. So each of the district regulations lay out the purpose of the district, and that really relates to your general plan land use designation. Again, there's this real connection between that two because the zoning implements your general plan. There's the land use regulations, which identifies for each district which land uses are permitted, which require a use permit, and whether that's a minor use permit, conditional use permit, and those that are prohibited. And then there's the development standards, which are the dimensional requirements like heights, setbacks, as well as supplemental standards if there's anything else district-specific would be included there. And that's in contrast to Division 3, which is your citywide regulations, which those are the types of regulations that either apply to all districts or to multiple districts. So they're not just district-specific like Division 2 was. So this includes things such as your affordable housing density bonus program, landscaping, non-conforming provisions, any standards for specific uses or parking signs. So those are the citywide standards. Division 4 is the administration and permits. So these are the provisions for administration of the code. They explain who's the decision maker, what the process for review is, what the process for that permit is. And that covers anything from very common procedures such as noticing procedures, the time of approval, all the way, and ministerial review from zoning clearance, which is just basically a check to make sure you're conforming with the zoning, all the way up to things such as amendments of the code, enforcement provisions, and so on. So Division 4 is the administrative procedures. And then finally, Division 5 is the terms and definitions. There's two main parts to this. One is the land use classifications, which are very important as they provide the definitions of the land uses, some of which in your current code, for example, has some regulations for land uses, but doesn't define what those are. So this very clearly defines what every land use that's regulated in your code has a definition for it, as well as general terms and definitions. So that's the broad overview of the contents, and I'll pass it back to staff for the top 10 changes.
Thanks, Martha. So the first change is related to what Martha touched on earlier, and that's the separation out of the implementation plan, the coastal implementation plan. In the current code, it is the zoning code / implementation plan. The whole code is the implementation plan. In working with coastal staff more recently, they suggested we look at how Pacific Grove did theirs and pull out the implementation plan, not pull out, but make it a separate section of it and identify what portions are implementation plan as opposed to having the whole code that way. That allows the city to update it more easily when we're not dealing with coastal resource issues. It was a great recommendation. Martha did a really good job putting that together. And again, it was a recommendation from coastal because it reduces the amount of times they have to look at things for amendments and the amount of times we have to take things to them for amendments. And it really sort of mirrors how the general plan, right, is formulated. Like the general plan, local coastal land use plan, it's a combined document, but the land use plan is only a portion of the general plan. It's not all of it. So it's basically, you know, the same thing kind of process we went through for the general plan updates. Yeah, I think that's about all I have to, speak to on that. So, what do you want to do? Does the commission want to ask questions first, or are we going to do the public comment first?
Well, I thought maybe we could go through the whole top 10 list.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd go
Okay.
through the whole list,
Okay.
because they're pretty brief.
Yeah, they are.
And then
Yeah,
we
okay.
can come back and we'll call for public comment on each item.
Okay, great. I wasn't exactly sure how we were doing that, so I
Well,
apologize.
but a general public comment after the top 10, we define, right? I'm hoping that maybe we can respond to all the correspondence we got and say, what are the 10 items we might want to work on tonight?
I would really like to stick to these 10 items that staff presented for tonight. And from the comment we got on emails, a lot of it does correspond to that. That's partly why I was interested in hearing public comment from everybody first, so we could see what the new things might be. But for now, let's go ahead and finish this part of the staff report, going through those brief top 10 changes, and then as we address the public comment, we can see what we need to go into more specifically.
Okay.
on what those mean.
So with the update, we sort of modernized the residential and commercial district standards. They have a nice table format. There's cross-referencing in it. Novel concept, given the current code doesn't have that. It addresses all of the development standards that are applicable to both the residential and commercial development. There's also some additional like design standards and requirements that are in there that the commission and staff can look to when approving projects consistent with these areas, which is nice. It's a good feature, I think. Third item, the big one, I'm sure lots of folks are interested in. We've got lots of public comment on the height. So there's a portion of the downtown running down Morro Bay Boulevard and going north on Main where the proposed height changes from 30 feet to 37 feet. And certainly generated a good amount of interest from folks and has from the very beginning. This has been a discussion that we've been having for a very long time, dating back to like 2016, I think. This was even part of the city's downtown and waterfront strategic planning process is where this came from. A lot of public outreach on this. This was discussed in some public workshops, several general plan advisory committee meetings, and then multiple planning commission meetings as well. But again, the idea is to raise it in that swath running down Morro Bay Boulevard and going north on Main. Some of the reasons behind it, there was interest in sort of generating potential like economic interest in the downtown. We don't get a lot of redevelopment there and a lot of, and so that was part of the concept there was also to provide potentially some housing down there. We also received input from our commercial business owners that they'd like to have more folks that live in and around the downtown. So there's folks that could patronize their businesses and maybe allow them to stay open a little bit later, which has kind of been an ongoing conversation we've had with the downtown commercial folks for several years.
Scott, any chance you have the map of that area?
The next slide, Commissioner Ocean. So what you're seeing on the slide, so the grayed out picture on the left is taken from the draft code, and the color picture rendition on the right came out of that sort of downtown waterfront strategic planning process. You'll notice that the area in red is the area where you would go to 37 feet, and it's expanded. It's larger than the area in the version on the left. What happened is several planning commission meetings ago, a couple of years ago now, as it relates to the zoning code update, the planning commission reduced the size of the area where the 37 feet would apply, and they stopped it going down Main Street at Beach. So you see it extend past Beach in the colored rendition, and you see it stop on the gray and sort of black rendition. So what you're seeing is on the black rendition, the areas in black are the areas that would go to 37 feet. On the right, the areas in red are the ones that would go to 37 feet, and you see them reduced. There's also a section kind of right at the corner of Main Street and Morro Bay Boulevard where on the color rendition, the lots extended a full block width for the area that would go up to 37 feet, and then you actually see that reduced now when you come to the figure on the left. So it reduces the overall area where these might be. I do want the Planning Commission to have a discussion about this evening. Is this something we're still interested in? I would note that the area that's in the current draft proposal only covers about 75 lots, and if we do really have interest in there, in doing that and going to that 37 feet and encouraging, residential uses above commercial, mixed-use development, that type of thing, it might be a good idea that we maybe look more towards the original version, which covered about 126 lots, and went block to block, because our lots are small in the downtown, right? They're like 5,000 square foot lots. It's very difficult to redevelop them to that height if you don't have more areas. So it'd be a good conversation to have, and love to see where the Planning Commission comes out on it. And then I'm sure there's lots of folks in the audience that also want to speak to that particular issue as well. So it'd be great to hear from you too. Citywide regulations. This is where we started talking about things like the fence height, which is of such interest to folks. The current code allows you to have a fence height into your front yard, street side yard of 3 feet. And then if you go to 50% open to air, see-through, then you can go to 4. The draft code starts it at 4 feet and allows you to go to 5 feet if you're 50% open to air. So I'm sure we'll get quite a bit of commentary related to that this evening. We certainly got a lot of written correspondence on this. And we have, throughout the process, this has been a sort of hot topic throughout the zoning code update process. This is not new that we're getting it right now. We've been getting this conversation ongoing since the beginning. So be good to hear more about that. Next one is, the change to the non-conforming section of our ordinance. This is an interesting change, and one that, sort of what we're hoping that encourages, redevelopment, just additions to existing single-family homes versus tear down and rebuilds to much larger, like the mansionization issue. It does allow you to maintain existing non-conforming setbacks and extend them with parameters. So if you can maintain that existing non-conforming setback as long as you maintain at least a 3-foot setback from the property lines, and that there's no additional encroachment from that addition that would maybe be in a setback into another setback, like say from a side to a rear or something along those lines. And then it also talks about the height for that addition that you might be doing that's in that non-conforming area has to be the same as the height of the existing structure. You can't increase it. And then when you do go to that second floor has to comply. So there are parameters around it. It's not just a free-for-all, and so it does speak to that. Moving to the rest of the 10 change, I'm going to hand this off to Cindy, and she's going to take 6 through 10.
Good evening. The parking is another one of the top 10 changes, and there are reduced parking requirements here in this new code for both residential and commercial areas. One thing I wanted to clarify, though, is that residential parking is not being eliminated. Residential uses would still be required to provide on-site parking. It just would not be required to be a garage, in the form of a garage. And just to give some context on how that policy came about, the previous Planning Commission really talked about how to, Scott in the last slide talked about utilizing affordable by design principles and what is happening to neighborhoods where we're designing homes around the automobile. And how can we promote more flexibility for property owners and how they redevelop their properties, or if they want to do an addition, but they don't have an existing garage because the home is really old. And then when they do have a garage, it's mostly filled with storage. And so the cars it's not actually being used to park cars. So in the new code, one of the big changes is that we would not require a covered and enclosed 2-car garage. You would still be required to provide 2 on-site spaces. It just doesn't need to be covered and enclosed. And so that's really kind of a paradigm shift too, because it's kind of thinking forward and thinking ahead on, how do we plan for vehicles, or maybe in the future, maybe we don't have vehicles and, really looking long-term ahead. So that's one of the top 10 changes. For commercial uses, requirements are being decreased on some of the commercial uses. And so with that, a description of that, a really good example is a lot of businesses, what they find is when there are commercial change-outs or commercial uses, if it's, depending on the type of use, it may trigger additional parking. And so, for example, like restaurants, we only park restaurants by the amount of customer dining area. And what we've found over the years is that a lot of businesses really kind of have to shrink the size of their customer dining area because they're trying to avoid paying, $15,000 per space in lieu spaces. And so previous planning commissions said, we have this policy in the North Main area where there are no commercial parking requirements if it's a like-for-like change-out. And so this is a policy that's being spread citywide, and that was put in the draft code. And then more encouragement of outdoor dining. Currently, uses are limited to the first 125 square feet, doesn't require parking. In the new code, it would increase the amount of outdoor dining to really kind of incentivize utilizing our outdoor spaces. When that policy was put into place, it was before COVID. So it was, very apropos now in that, more people want to see outdoor dining and want to utilize that. The last component of the parking is that parking would not be required in the Waterfront district. This is really a way to codify what the city's existing longstanding practice has been, When it comes to historic parking, the city's on the waterfront lease sites has recognized historic parking credit. And, but more importantly, during the development of the draft zoning code, the Planning Commission really talked about what do we want the waterfront to look like? And in the community workshops we did, and it was really like, we want people walking in the waterfront area. We don't want people sidestepping parking spaces as they're walking down the Embarcadero going from one lease site to the other. And how to improve the ambiance. And so the desire was to not require parking, and that implementation of other programs such as paid parking in the waterfront area, which would encourage turnover of street parking spaces and providing for parking above the bluff. And that would improve the waterfront area. Number seven, this is the update to the sign ordinance. So for longtime residents of the city, and even moderate time residents, the city has long tried to update its sign ordinance. And so a big change with the sign regulations is that it would break up standards by 4 commercial districts in town. There is a sign district map in the draft zoning code that identifies an Embarcadero district, a North Main district, a Quintana district, and downtown district. And the reason is that the intent was that each of the business districts really have different needs. A type of sign that might work on the Embarcadero might not be appropriate for North Main's business district, and vice versa. And so this provides updated standards. It also updates the calculation of signs, provides more definition and clarity on the types of signs that are allowed, and then also adds standards for when a master sign program is required. And that's to make sure that it's a balanced commercial design, especially as businesses are going in and out. 8 is design review. So this is a new chapter that establishes design review authority. And this is not a chapter that we currently have in our current zoning code, but for example, design review, the Planning Commission would have design review authority on new homes greater than 2,500 square feet. That's not in our current zoning code. It also establishes design review authority on multi-unit development over a certain square footage. And then also for non-residential development. There are some authority thresholds for director approval. The current plan development overlay chapter that is in our current zoning code would be replaced with standards that are included in both the design review and the modifications chapter. And then the plan development overlay would really be, as Martha described in her presentation, when someone applies for a planned development project that you would customarily see in other cities where it's a community plan development, typically, and not typically, excuse me, the regulation in the draft code, it would be for half-acre or larger development sizes, and then also in the waterfront area. Housing. So housing is another big change. The inclusionary housing and density bonus section have been updated. This section would require that affordable units be provided or in lieu fees provided on commercial developments, multifamily, and condo conversions. And so this really kind of strengthens the affordable housing requirements beyond what we have in our current ordinance. It would also require that new larger homes would be required to include an ADU or pay an in lieu fee, where currently that's not the requirement. And then importantly, the code has been updated to allow housing in more zones, and a big change is that in the district commercial zone district, which is what we would know currently as the C2 zone, is it would allow residential in the DC zone, where currently you could only do that if it's permitted as a residential security unit. And so that is a big change. And then lastly, of the top 10 changes, the code has been updated to be consistent with state law updates. And specifically, 3 of those big updates are accessory dwelling units, density bonus provisions, and SB 9 policies regarding urban lot splits in certain zone criteria. And those are the top 10 changes that staff identified as noteworthy in the zoning code. We do have additional part of the presentation. I don't know if we're going to stop here.
I think we have 2 more slides.
Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Scott, and he'll bring it to a home run here.
I do want to pause 1 second and address, I meant to address it when I was talking about height in the downtown. I know there's been some concern and discussion about the city's increasing height in our residential neighborhoods to 30 feet. We're not. The height is staying at 25 with the exception of the beach track, which is, which is less, but it would be 25 feet, and we have the requirement that's in there that people are seeing it. It says no wall can exceed 30 feet. That standard exists in the current zoning code, and it's to deal with properties that are sloped. So you don't have large, 35, 40-foot walls. You could have a wall that's that tall, and the house could still comply with the 25-foot height limitation as long as you're dealing with average natural grade. That's the high point and the low point. So that's what that's supposed to. That's where that comes from. And I just wanted to state that we're not changing that requirement.
So it stays the same?
Stays the same. Carries forward. Yeah. I know that was certainly a point in several of the pieces of correspondence that we got, and I wanted to at least put it out there so folks can marinate on it while we're talking.
I think for folks to, if you want to visualize that, you think about in North Morro Bay, especially, there's a lot of houses, fairly large ones, built really on the steep slopes of that hillside. So rather than having them on piers, they have a whole wall that's coming down, but the house itself, some of them are only 1 story at the road and then sort of drop down to a 2nd story. Some even have a basement area because of that. But the wall is structural. It's not an increase, as you said.
Not uncommon, yeah. It's a really typical thing. It's really just to address large uninterrupted wall planes that they're not very attractive, and you probably don't want one next to you if you have to look at it very much. So. All right, last 2 slides. This really just talks a little bit about the process. I mean, we've, at least as it relates to zoning, we've gone through 12 public meetings on zoning. I don't know how many exactly we did we'd have to go back and look, in front of the General Plan Advisory Committee. They also reviewed zoning. It wasn't just the general plan. So we've had multiple meetings. We had workshops that discussed these things. We had stakeholder interviews, all kinds of those types of public forum things. The overall general plan update and zoning code update is titled Plan Morro Bay. We've had over 70 public meetings on that and counting. We did also, in the staff report, you'll see the public comment summaries. They detail some of the public comment that we received from general public, from the Embarcadero Master Leaseholders Group, EML, from the GAC, which is the Government Affairs Committee of the Chamber of Commerce. And in that comment summary, you'll note where, we'll see what the comment is, and what section it applies to, what, if anything, staff made as far as changes, and if we didn't make changes, why we didn't make changes. So that's all kind of detailed in those comment sheets. So if you want to, look to what's happened and how we got here, and that tells some of the story, or a good amount of the story anyway. We did make some, changes related to the last few rounds of comments. Related to clarifications on commercial parking standards, talking about, we added tables now for because we didn't have them originally, for the Harbor District, the Waterfront District. We didn't originally have the tables for the uses and things in there. We had them described in a written format, and so people are like, that's weird, why don't you make it like the rest of the document? So we made it like the rest of the document. We provided some clarification related to our open space standards, and we have the allowed uses also in there for the DC zone. That wasn't an original thing that was in the document, but we received some comment that there was interested in doing that. If the city really wants to do housing, we should allow mixed use wherever we can put it, and so we added it into that section. The Coastal Commission review. We've been going back and forth on several items with the Coastal Commission recently. I did touch on the change to the implementation plan, sort of pulling that out and making it a standalone and identifying it separately. We've also worked with them on environmental justice policies and low-cost visitor serving accommodations. And so you see edits in the track change version of the document that reflects changes we've made in response to our ongoing discussions with the Coastal Commission. With that, we can wrap up the presentation and move back to Commissioner and the public comment.
Thank you very much to staff and Martha Miller for presenting all of that. Do commissioners have any quick questions on this part of the presentation from staff? Joe?
I do. With respect to the maximum height in the commercial area of downtown Morro Bay, I remember from Planning Commission numerous years ago, when the discussion was first starting, in part it was promoted, I think, because would-be developers said they wanted a higher ceiling on the first floor, and then it would be nice to have a second and third floor to office and residential, as I recall.
That is part of it. You know, at 30 feet, I mean, we're probably not going to have a lot of Class A commercial in town. It's probably not really who we are. But still having a viable commercial space in there that's got a nice height to it, so you can, so you have display merchandise and things like that in it. People do desire that, and so that was part of the conversation. It was that conversation. It was about providing housing in the downtown. It was, maybe encouraging, some investment, that type of thing. It was all of those items, really.
Well, my specific question is really a core one. How did we get to the number 37? That's what I'm trying to remember or wanting.
So you can do 3 stories it's difficult, but you can do it in, a shorter version, maybe like 35 feet, 36 feet, something along those lines. You get at least up to 37. You have a little bit of opportunity there with pitched roofs and things like that. If you're going to do 35, you're going to have a flat roof.
Okay.
And if you have commercial, you're going to have things that go with commercial. If you have like a restaurant down there, you're going to have ducting and larger areas between floors to deal with those types of things. And it's just, you run out of room. So that's kind of where it came from. It was kind of the minimum we could get to that would give you the third floor without maybe having every one of them have a flat roof.
And then the second question relates to design guidelines. So there's a rather thorough list of categories that we would consider in design approval, as opposed to a precise plan. So are we losing something by not requiring a precise plan, or is it neutral? Are we gaining something?
So the precise plan refers to the plan development overlay that's in the current code, and that's part of the process. And the precise plan is also what you normally see down on the waterfront. It's concept precise. Concept goes Planning Commission recommendation to City Council. The applicant goes off to the Coastal Commission to get their conditional coastal development permit. And then they come back to us with the precise plan, which really allows us to review any changes that were made by coastal that we hadn't seen already, and that comes back to the Planning Commission. So that precise plan thing is combined when we do it outside of the waterfront because it's not necessary. We're not having anybody else review it, so we'll do a combined concept precise, and you'll see that recommendation go Planning Commission, City Council done. So you're not really losing anything out of that. You'll still be doing the process down on the waterfront. And in most of the properties that require Planning Commission and City Council review, we'll still do that.
So we would still be getting as detailed a presentation as we've been getting in the past, if not more detailed. Okay.
If not more, correct.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a lot more. Like when I started here 8 years ago, you had nothing as it relates to design guidelines, not much anyway. You now have residential design guidelines. You have a design element in your general plan. You have a design chapter in your draft zoning code, and you have other design policies requirements that are actually inside of the code as it relates to the commercial and residential standards that are actually in those chapters. So you have a lot more things that talk about design. So.
Thanks, Joe. Asia, any questions?
A couple of quick ones. Environmental justice. What are we talking about?
It's the best way to describe that.
What are the issues? I know what environmental justice is. How are we engaging that topic?
Yeah, I'm trying to couch it in how the commission gave us the edits because there was a requirement that came from them. It's a focus of the commission now. We do have, those same policies in our general plan as well.
I was just going to add, a lot of that had to do with having multi-language. Sorry, hello? Nope. Oh, okay. My green light was on, so I thought it was amplified. A lot of that had to do with ensuring multi-language access, transparency, and you'll see the edits in the IP portion of the document under CDP processing and being more inclusive in promoting environmental justice.
We haven't established any environmental justice zones within the city.
We don't, and one of the other things that that it talks about in there is it has a low-income definition that kind of gets you to that point, and I don't know that we have any areas that actually meet that inside the city based on census data. But, you know, were we to get to that point, then we would have the policies in here, and we would be required to use those and do analysis as it's directed in the draft zoning code if we were to have those communities in the city.
And so is there any kind of policy in the zoning code relative to future environmental justice issues?
There are. They speak to they speak to how we're supposed to review projects, and that we're supposed to take those communities into consideration. You have to identify them, you know, and oftentimes that's done through, you know, census processes and things like that.
Got it.
And also the policies are located also in the coastal land use plan, so in our general plan, LCP.
So that's our main source.
That's our main source. So then, you know, coastal commission staff, their comment to us is, okay, you know, you're doing your zoning code IP, how are you going to implement those policies now that you have in your land use plan? Because again, that's why we're here, you know, zoning codes implement general plans and coastal land use plans. So
It's worthwhile.
The meat of that is already adopted environmental justice policies that we have.
So my next question quickly is about inclusionary housing. We have a policy right now. Could you state it quickly? What our inclusionary formula is?
So we have inclusionary housing. The draft policy or the existing?
The existing first.
The existing has to do with the amount of affordable housing you're required to place into projects. It's typically 10%.
So it's 10%, and that's something we've been doing for a number of years.
Yes. Yeah.
And just a quick question, do you find that frustrating development?
I haven't seen it really be a barrier to development. I haven't had anybody walk away say, I'm not going to do that and provide it. So it's not been, I think most cities have them. And so people that do development, you know, expect to see them, right?
And is it staying the same in the proposed code?
So we expand the policies to a wide range of things, to commercial development. We expand them to larger single-family homes, and whether we might have like an in lieu fee, or that you have to pay over 2,500 square feet, or if you're providing an ADU, you're good. And so we have triggers in there for certain things.
The 10% roughly, I mean, that stays the same. We're not changing that.
Yeah.
But it's the idea of in lieu fees.
Yeah, expansion of that whole concept.
And what's the formula for commercial?
I have to go back and look at it now. I don't remember off the top of my head.
Okay.
I apologize.
But, no, it's all right. But it's, so that's important. I need to kind of focus on that a little bit. But fundamentally, there's no changes.
Yeah.
So we were adding those things into it. We didn't used to apply it to commercial development. We didn't used to apply it to single-family homes. That was kind of implementation of the city's housing element is where that came from. And then there was housing grants available, SB2 funding and the like that we used to develop those policies.
Got it. Thanks.
I did find that section. It's commercial projects, they're required to provide at least one affordable dwelling unit within the project or pay an in lieu fee. So if you look at the track change version of the draft zoning code that's on the website, in 1724, which is the chapter number of the affordable housing, all of the track changes that are visible are things that are new from the old code.
Got it.
And you see that there is a lot of. Well, it's purple ink on my document, but there's a lot of purple ink. There's a lot more triggers of when you have a project that will get triggered. The density bonus section, I mean, there's a lot of update, and it really kind of strengthens.
And if you don't know, but what is the commercial formula for in lieu fees?
I would have to look for that.
Okay,
I
I
readily
can
see
do
it.
that later, thanks.
Okay.
I think it's on page 159. All new commercial projects of 2,500 square feet or more of commercial floor area
and mixed-use projects of 2,500 square feet or more of commercial floor area apply to the, are required. I guess it doesn't have a
Oh,
specific
yeah.
formula.
It's $5 per square foot.
Got it.
And so for residential,
Got
since
it.
I'm there,
Yeah,
it's 25
yeah,
per square foot. And then mixed use, you're separated out portion that's residential and portion that's commercial.
Got it, thanks.
And that's page 162 of the zoning code for anyone who's interested.
Is that it, Bill?
I'm done.
Thank you. Mike, any questions?
I don't think I'm going to have a question, but I want a quick comment. So Cindy, those triggers, a lot of that has to do with new state laws, right? Law requirements. So that's not going to slow down. That's probably going to pick up. That's my prediction because of all the changes that are going to be happening and, you know, and environmental justice, social justice. You know, these are all things that are going to drive changes to general plans, developments, everything. And that, I don't think that's going to slow down necessarily, but it's going to pick up. But I like the fact that Joe did comment that since 2017, the Planning Commission has held 12 public hearings. Scott talked about that, 70 total public hearings. I mean, so obviously a lot of work has been done. And Joe, I believe you were on the Planning Commission at the time, 2017, and Susan. But you have 3 commissioners that weren't on the commission, you know, on the Planning Commission. But obviously we're going to use our due diligence to catch up and take the baton from our past planning commissioners and use our best judgment as we move forward. But again, I think planning is not something that ever ends. We're in a total planning process, right, Scott? You think you're done, but then you got to start all over again or deal with the new state law or deal with new standards. So all I'm saying is that was my general comment that, you know, we just need to be more nimble, and we've seen that. Scott said when he got here, there were no guidelines, right?
Yeah.
Design guidelines. And how many years was that ago?
I've been here for 8.
So
Below.
we had no design guidelines, and so now we have them. So that's a quick turnaround, relatively speaking.
We had them in no documents, and now we have them in every document that we
So
create.
there's your raise, Scott, for the year. But what I'm saying is that's tremendous. See, that's what I was trying to get to, is that we're moving fast, okay? From having design guidelines to now dealing with this 400-page monster with a lot of things that are triggered because of state law, new standards, and other things. We'll just say that, and other things. So that was all I had to say, Susan, so I just wanted to give it back. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we're now going to open to public comment. Joe, one more?
One really quick question. With respect to the in lieu fees for affordable housing, the old zoning code, and I believe the proposed one, still requires that the in lieu fees be spent within Morro Bay. Is that correct?
I don't think there's an ability to spend them outside, is there?
Right.
No,
No, I mean,
Yeah.
the explicit wording is in Morro Bay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, thank you, Joe. So we're going to give this a try. We're going to look at the top 10 changes, and I think we'll just go through them in order. Some there may be no comments on. The first one was coastal resources, where the coastal implementation plan, which consists of discrete sections within the zoning code, clearly identifies which regulations protect coastal resources and are subject to coastal commission review. So for anybody who's new out there, there are parts of town where you're required to have some sort of coastal commission review of whatever project you want to do. Separating it out from the zoning code allows us to address things without having to go to coastal that don't relate to those particular districts. Did anybody have any public comment on that particular item? See one, Mr. Martini. And you will have 1 minute on this. Yes, sir.
And I'm not sure if this is a right subject for now, but I noticed on the south, from from the boat launch south. There's an existing map that shows the existing commercial zoning. That has been incorrect for the last 25 years. There's been no commercial, and that was supposed to be corrected. I don't think it's ever been corrected, and it needs to be corrected. There's like the boatyard. Other than that, all the old commercial that was there 25 years ago in that residential zoning no longer exists, and so that needs to be corrected. I do know Cindy corrected the map. You know, with the actual zoning was incorrect, showing half the water being on the land. So that at least has been corrected, but I think that map also needs to be corrected. And whether this is the right time for it or not, I'm not sure.
I think it's a perfect time to comment on that, and I know you've brought it up many times. I remember hearing it from the General Plan Advisory Committee, which was many years ago. Perhaps we could just have a quick response on that. Maybe what we could do is just.
So yeah, I mean, so we've talked about it several times, and largely the conversation that we had with Mr. Martini previously was about the concern he had that showed the incorrect location of where the water, I mean, it was really just how the map lined up with the underlying aerial, but I mean, we did end up fixing that. But I don't think we've ever had any direction from General Plan Advisory Committee or Planning Commission, or City Council for that matter, to change the land use. So the land use is that, the land use was adopted by City Council a year ago, and the zoning code reflects that same commercial zoning. So I don't think we've ever had any direction or desire to change that from commercial. Here, yeah, okay, yeah. So I mean, so that's not where we've gone. So
Okay.
you don't see that, and if we did that, that would have to be something that takes place later, because we wouldn't be able to make that change now without the land use plan map as well. So there's some pieces that would go into that.
Can I clarify real quick?
Real quick.
There's an existing map that shows what exists there today. And that existing map says there is commercial in this area as of right now, you know, in the residential. And I'm not talking about changing the zoning. I'm talking about a map that shows that it says this is the existing commercial south of the boat launch. And it's incorrect. And it's showing, you know, because 25 years ago there were commercial buildings there. It no longer exists. But the maps, unless, I mean, I saw it online where it's still showing commercial uses in that area that haven't been there for 25, 30 years.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't have to do with the changing of the zoning, it just has to do with the correcting of the map that shows commercial and residential.
I think likely what the map is meant to show is what the zoning is, not what the current uses are. Is that?
No, that's.
So he's not referring to a map that we're looking at. It has nothing to do with the zoning code. I believe what he's referring to is the SLOCOG land use map that's in the general plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's not our map. We don't make that change.
Okay. So, and I'm going to ask Anthony, and I know this is going to be a little bit tricky with people waiting in the queue. If there's anybody listening from home who has a comment on the coastal resources section, it's going to be a little hard to know that. Or should we just wait for all the potential phone call-in comments?
I do not see any raised hands in the
that's a
queue
good thing.
currently,
All
so
right.
anytime.
No conflict on
And I
that.
think we still have, okay.
Do we have another coastal resource?
Yeah.
Question or comment? Yes.
Yes, Betty Winholtz, and I sent you some comments specifically on this topic, so rather than take up time, please just attend to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. So any other comments on the number 1, coastal resources? So we will close comment on that and move to development standards. And I would like to say, and especially in response to Betty and some of you who did write in, as I said before, some great comments on stuff, and some of it just came in today. So what I personally would plan to do is really review all those comments closely to be able to address them at the next meeting in more depth, if, hopefully that's acceptable. Okay, development standards, updated residential and commercial district standards, setbacks updated in residential districts based on lot size. Building design standards are now included for multi-unit and non-residential development. Supplemental regulations provide additional detail and illustration to improve user-friendliness of code. Anybody have any public comment on that change? Ms. Winholtz?
I hope what you're talking about is setbacks. Is that what that section is
It
about?
talks about setbacks in the residential districts, yes.
Okay, and that would be setbacks of house from lots, and it would be setbacks for sheds on lot lines? No, it's not?
I think,
There's a different topic for,
yeah, I think
The
that-
sheds is the later one, Betty.
Oh, the shed's the later one.
Okay.
So this was just about the house in relationship to the lot lines, and it's not about height?
No,
Okay, it's just a little confusing out here.
I know.
So my comment about that quickly was that I've experienced a fire in my neighborhood, and I experienced a friend who lost a house to a fire a couple of years ago in North Morro Bay. And so my concern is that setbacks for houses and hangovers need to not be so little. It's really, this house in particular, if it had been to a 2 or 3 foot lot line, this second house would have just gone with the first house. But because it was setback, it only lost a wall. But the house in North Morro Bay, it had the 2 to 3 foot setback, both houses burned because they were so close together. So for me, safety is more important than bulk and size of a building.
Thank you, Ms. Winholtz. Another comment on this topic?
My name is Heidi Bea, and I second what Batty Winslow just said.
Thank you. Anthony, do we have anybody in the queue for this item?
Thank you, Chair. Currently, I do not see any raised hands in the
Okay.
queue.
Great.
Well, Gary Johnson, Morro Bay. I got a question. You're talking about how the house between the house and the fence is 5 feet right now? Then I found out when they built the house behind us, the eave is only 2 feet from my property. I don't know how that works. To me, the eave should start the 5 foot back. And then, because a friend of mine, they had one so bad that the water off the roof was coming off into his
Coming in-
property.
into the
So
property.
I don't know about that. That's my comment.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Next comment? Welcome.
Good evening, Commissioners. Paul Donnelly, resident of Morro Bay. And I just wanted to say something about the setback proposals. It's my understanding in some places there may be a permanent structure within 0 setbacks. And how would one know where the property line is so that they're not building on someone else's property? You'd be surprised throughout this whole town, there's disputes over where that property line is. And so it would probably require a record of survey to be able to allow that. The other thing is that the 37-foot height limit in the downtown area, I just really don't understand why you'd want to do that. It serves no purpose. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anybody else have comments on the development standards and those changes? So we're going to close comment on that and back to staff. 0 setbacks, is that only in commercial? Or
It's a good, so we do have 0 setbacks in commercial. I think what Mr. Donnelly was referring to is really the concept behind the one that's a little bit later on in here where we're talking about sheds that could be against property lines, that type of thing. I believe that's what he was referring to.
Okay, and I think that is a topic that
Yeah.
we will hit pretty hard later, I think. Question on, did we change the setbacks dramatically in the residential zones?
No, we largely kept them the way that they were. We just changed how they were done. So in the current zoning code, setbacks, we're in the draft, we were doing them by lot size. But we're based, the lot size one, the concept was based on the overlays that we did. We had like S1, S2 overlays, and those deal with differing size lots. And so those are where you get the reduced setbacks, like the 3 feet, those types of things. They're carried forward in the draft code. They're just now done by lot size because that's why those overlays were in place, because you had smaller lots in those locations. So
Okay.
it was an easier way and better way to do it.
And this is maybe not entirely relevant, but I'm assuming in our current building codes, state codes even, that there is better consideration for firewalls on exterior walls between houses.
When we have the
Because we
minimum.
do have those close lots, and the fire issue is.
We do. I mean, I think things are always improving with the code cycles, but in general, our minimum setbacks are 3 feet. So the idea there would be you'd have, 6 foot of separation between structures in those areas where we have small lots and reduced setbacks. Certainly, we have ones that are at 3 feet, and then we have ones that are non-conforming, and they're at 1 feet, at 1 foot or something along those lines, where you get a fire, yeah, you can get damage to the adjacent structure for sure, and then depending on what that structure is, exterior coverings are, if it's not, say, stucco or hardy plank siding or one of those things, and it's an older, and it's a wood product or something that's aged, that can catch on fire. That has to do with the age of structures and things like that.
Right. And how about the overhang issue? I thought we had.
We have requirements that you can't get closer than 2 feet, I believe. Yeah, 2 feet to the setback, yeah.
Okay, all right. Any other commissioner comments or questions on that item? All right. Moving on to commercial heights. So this one we may get some more comment on. This was where the Planning Commission had previously reviewed the increased height in the downtown area to go up to 37 feet, where now 30 feet is the limit. I think Scott did address the thinking that commissioners had on allowing a little more flexibility just in very specific areas, and likely, again, still would be reviewed project by project. I don't think this would be.
Yeah, it's anything that's going to be doing this is going to be coming before the Planning Commission. So there's that caveat. So it's in the commercial zone. It's going to be a mixed-use development. It's going to be something that comes to the Planning Commission and has to be respectful of the design policies that we have in place. The several that I just talked about a minute ago. So that would be how it's handled for sure. I would imagine, assuming this moves forward and we keep something along these lines, you would see this be one of these, like the first one that we ever see, being a candidate for those concept reviews that we do along those lines. So yeah.
But to be clear, if we pass this zoning, this is an incentive to go to that height. So design review doesn't necessarily give us the option to turn down height. To be clear.
I guess, certainly we could make changes to how it's written. That we have ability, like say in North Main or whatever, to go up to 30 feet, but you have to kind of prove your case, right? For residential structure.
Yeah, but the discussion right now is, do we raise that limit?
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's open this for public comment. Welcome.
Good evening. Shirley Frazier, 26-year homeowner and resident in Morro Bay. I implore you not to go ahead with the height to increase it past the 30 feet. It's not consistent with the area. It's not consistent with our city. Commercial applicants oftentimes ask for variances for height and other accommodations, and lots of times those are met because they present with significant benefit to the public, but we as the residents have to live with that. I think it's very difficult, again, when it's put into law, to walk that backwards and to disallow something. I think a lot of people, those of us that live here and those that visit, come here to escape that urban city feel. This could be 3 stories or more. And it certainly, I don't think, belongs anywhere near the waterfront, down on the Embarcadero, the Vistra property, or anything. We enjoy such a beauty and a view corridor of so many things here in the city, and this is going to work against that. So I would really appreciate your serious consideration of this. I thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for your comments. Next person.
Susan, could
let's let
But real quickly while we're there, would everyone stand up who agreed with her, please? Thank you. And those who didn't agree with that comment who are here tonight?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would also, as long as we're going to interrupt the process, point out that this is not on the
For
waterfront.
important reasons.
It's not on Vistra, and it's not on any residential locations. It is just in several specific blocks of Morro Bay Boulevard and Main Street. And actually half lots, basically. So the street-facing side as opposed to the other side of.
You're correct. It doesn't go full block width, in other words, yeah. Mhm.
Okay, wanted to clarify that because last speaker said something about the Embarcadero. It will not happen there. It will not happen on the Vistra site, and it will not happen in your residential districts. Those heights are already established. Yes, sir.
Hi, David Nelson. I've been in Morro Bay a long time. First time I've been in here since the pandemic, so welcome me back. I'm totally against this 37 feet, even downtown. You know, we keep talking about more housing. We're talking about setbacks so we can have more housing. Well, you know, we don't have any water. You guys remember that? When I moved here back in '79, there was moratoriums everywhere because there's no water. We've spent millions of dollars at getting water here. Now you want to make 75 properties go up 3 stories for what? You know, if you want housing, do away with vacation rentals. I was looking online today. It said 280 rentals in Morro Bay. I thought it was 175, but you should look it up on vacation rentals in Morro Bay. They list 280. That's ridiculous. So we keep talking about homeless and what we're going to do for houses. That's it. Get rid of that, but no 37-foot downtown. You can't see the sky.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson, and welcome back. Next comment.
Good evening, Heidi Bea. I am against increasing from 30 feet to 37 feet. To quote Mr. Graham, he said to allow mixed use wherever you can put it for increased residential housing. I have a home in Morro Bay. I have a home in Pasadena where they have overdone mixed use and the parking is horrendous. There is no sufficient parking and it has bled into the residential areas. And you people are discussing in putting paid parking. Where are the visitors going to pay? This is only going to increase the stress in the outlying areas of the existing residentials. And it's also going to destroy the quaintness of the city. I come from Pasadena to Morro Bay to get away from Pasadena, not to embrace a second Pasadena. Thank you.
Thank you. Next comment, Mr. Martini.
Bill Martin again, thank you. Yeah, we're advertising Morro Bay as a quaint fishing village. If you go into San Luis Obispo, you'll see what Morro Bay will look like if you go with this height limit. Actually, 37 feet means 4 stories, not 3. You can actually get a 4-story building in 37 feet. You can drop your parking lot 2 feet underground. I own a building that's 30 foot tall, 10-foot ceilings, 3 stories. So there's no problem on getting a 4-story building downtown. And I can't imagine the building that I own on Main Street. I mean, it would just be horrendous even at 30. So if you want to keep the quaint fishing village and not look like downtown SLO or Southern Cal, I think you better keep it at 30. It would just ruin the character of the town. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on this item? Ms. Winholtz?
Yes, just quickly as an example of mixed use, which I believe has not worked in Morro Bay, is at the corner of Surf and Main Street, where they've got 2-story mixed use, workspace below, housing up above. And if you'll notice on the east side of Main, those have all become vacation rentals. It's not that people are living downtown. They don't want to live in that environment. And that side particularly actually has off-street parking, but I understand what she's saying about parking, that will be an issue. And so I don't think that's a concept that works here. And I think it's also kind of becoming a passé concept. And that there was one other thing, and I'm not going to remember it, but thank you.
Thanks, Betty. Next comment.
I'm sorry, may I just ask a question? We're talking about the height at the 30 feet and going up. Are you still debating, I apologize, are you still debating the 75 parcels up to the 126? Because that would be something too to
Yeah,
to
we
consider that
haven't,
we're-
we will discuss that. It'll be interesting. I'm guessing that because of so much resistance even to doing the 7 extra feet in the, those smaller limited parcels, that will certainly
Okay.
affect our discussions on that.
That's all I wanted to ask,
Yeah,
because
thank
that would
you.
be another point too.
Sure.
Again, I understand the specific area.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments on this?
Good evening, Commissioners and staff. Kristen Hedlund from North Morro Bay. I would like to say that at a prior Planning Commission meeting, when someone attempted to change the zoning to higher density as changing the elevation in the commercial zone to 37 feet, you're increasing the value of the property. And what we will see here in the downtown area, we will see 4-story buildings. Like the gentleman said, the parking will go down below, there'll be 4 stories. It'll be out of character. People come here to see a nice fishing community, and I am opposed to the 37 feet in the commercial district. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kristen. Any other comments on this?
Yes, hello, my name's Todd McGuire. I'm for the increase in height in the development. I'd also like the commission to consider expanding the footprint of what's going to be allowed, because looking at the map right now, it'd be very difficult if you truly want a mixed use and help the business owners of downtown and provide housing. It's very difficult to build on the sites that are in red right now. First of all, you're going to have to get multiple people to sell you their parcels to put something together. Putting that puzzle together is very difficult. A larger area, if we just want one mixed use, it'd be very difficult unless we expanded the area. I also want you guys to take into consideration that, in my experience, most people come to these commission meetings to oppose things, to be vocal. So don't take a stand-up vote as the citywide opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate those comments. Any other comments? Good evening.
Hello, Commissioners. I'm Christy Van Cleve, a homeowner in Morro Bay, and I think it is important to study this issue in the fine-grained rather than the more broad brush that's been put at it. For instance, it was mentioned before about the rear blocks. There might be places where that would be appropriate and actually might preserve the character of Main Street. So rather than saying, oh, we just cut that off at a half block, I think it's very important to study the very specific situation. There could possibly be a site or several sites that would be appropriate for this height and would then enable Main Street to thrive. I know that's the reason that this was discussed to begin with. And I think it is important that we encourage new development here that could actually help preserve the character of what's here. So important to preserve the fine-grained nature of Main Street, but possibly to identify very limited areas where this could exist.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. Anybody else have comments on this issue? Gary Johnson?
Oh, hey, you know my name.
Well, yeah. Only
Okay,
lived here
I don't
a
want to
few
repeat
years,
what
Gary.
everybody's saying, but I grew up in San Diego. I grew up, after that, we moved to Downey, got married, went to Diamond Bar. Diamond Bar, we went up to the Bay Area. It was pretty good, all that. The developers would just love to come to this town, because I'll guarantee you, once you start, you can't quit. And that's what's happened. Every town I go into, when I leave, you look at SLO. I don't go into SLO anymore. I can't do it. If there's no parking, and even they're going so high, I don't know how those people are going to live in those condos. God, there's hundreds of them going in. To me, it's just, I don't know. Anyway, I don't want to repeat it myself or anybody else, but my feeling is, don't let the developers come in here and ruin what we have. I don't mind development, that's fine. That's good. But going up in the air, no, oh no, you got to quit.
Thanks, Gary.
Oh, 1 minute. It used to be 3 in the olden days. This is
We
tough.
changed things up tonight a little bit, but they're to
So
give you
anyway, yeah.
opportunities.
My name is
Speak
Andy
quick.
Hamp, a longtime resident of Morro Bay and owner of Cypress RV and mobile home park on Main and Beach. And 4 years ago, plus, I was here opposing the height increase north of Beach Street, and I'm still opposed to it. The Planning Commission deliberated the topic extensively and came to the same conclusion. And for us, there's specific reasons. As a property owner, you might think you want to go up, but the two-dimensional zoning maps don't show this. But the vacant lot on the corner of Main and Beach right next to it is already 7 feet above our grade. So zoning would already allow a massive building height 37 feet above us. And that's historical reasons I can't get into now because of the time limits. And there aren't any other properties along Main Street in our vicinity that have this unique situation. So for us, the higher the buildings, the more spaces will be degraded. Blocked out sun, this would completely be in the shade in the winter because we have a narrow lot in front, a narrow entry, reduced privacy for our visitors, blocked satellite TV, closed-in claustrophobic atmosphere for our park, street noise funneled into our property, and all the other negative impacts. So, please don't make our park, our main street, and a canyon surrounded and smothered by mega structures that are completely out of scale with the rest of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else for public comment on this item? We have a taker.
Eric Ford, been here for 34 years or so. Just wanted to say, I am against the height increase. It's out of character for the city, but that's already been mentioned. But what I would like to mention is that I've heard many comments on how many public meetings they've had about this entire facelift you're proposing for this whole city. Okay, you maybe had 50 hours of public meetings. How many hours have you put in to developing this alternative plan to monster-size Morro Bay? I mean, compare. I mean, yes, we've had a few more. I mean, I don't know how many public meetings there have. I've been here for 34 years, and I just got a piece of paper talking about what's actually, anyway.
Thank you.
Please consider the public more than just referring to public meetings.
Thank you. We have another commenter.
Well, just briefly, I just want you to know I'm Natalia Mirzoyan. I've lived in this town for 50 years. And all the people I know that are longtime residents, and I think we should matter, is that they don't want the character of Morro Bay to change drastically, which I think higher buildings would certainly contribute to, and I hope that doesn't happen. And just out of curiosity, which of you is the oldest length resident in Morro Bay?
Probably me, I think. I've been here since '88.
Okay. Just as I figured, thank you.
Any other comments?
June Swall, and now a resident, but probably close, that's not true, close to 80 years coming, being a part of Morro Bay community in a recreational way. And once you start taking away the uniqueness of Morro Bay, you're going to diminish something that you can't get back. And it does have a very special thing that very many areas now are being deprived of. So I hope we will really, now that I'm a resident, I really feel even more strongly about keeping it. I didn't worry about it when I was coming as a child, but I do now, and I think it's very special what is here. So I hope we'll keep that.
Thank you. I'm impressed with how long you say you've been coming, because, come on. All right, anybody else? So if no one else is in the audience, Anthony, do we have anybody on the phone or Zoom?
Thank you, Chair Stewart. Currently, I do not see any raised hands in the queue.
All right, so we will close public comment on this item and bring it back to the commissioners. Who wants to start? Asia.
This item in particular.
Just this item in particular, yeah, the commercial heights and the downtown core area.
This is discussion, not specific
Just
questions.
discussion or questions for staff. Yeah, either one.
Sure. So thinking about everyone's feedback and other feedback we've heard through email, I feel like as a resident of the city and as a planning commissioner, this is something that's on my mind a lot because I live in a part of Morro Bay that is not walkable. And so it's been a long discussion in my family to figure out where we can live in Morro Bay that we can walk with our kids and with our family around town. And we would have loved to find housing in downtown that fits our small family size and is also a little bit more affordable. So I can definitely see the benefit of having opportunity for incremental development that provides apartment space, more options for apartments, more options for smaller housing units. But I also hear everyone's concern, and so I'm really interested to hear the rest of the commissioners' feedback. And I'm also very interested in the comment about examining individual parcels, because when we look at the map and the number of parcels that were originally looked at to be at 37 feet in the dark gray area, and then there was the light gray area that was to be designated parcels for up to 30 feet in height. I think that the incremental nature of those designations is really helpful. Looking at the impact of a 37-foot building next to a 30-foot building next to a 25 or other, there are 30-foot height designations throughout the downtown area as well. It might be helpful to have some visuals as we continue the discussion, or maybe for the next meeting. I would love to, maybe I'll go around and take some pictures of examples of impact and what buildings and parcels specifically might be impacted. Those are my initial thoughts, but.
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
We do have some parcels in the downtown that do have residential above, and it is residential. There are people living there. I certainly talked about visiting my daughter in Evanston, where there's, they've converted many of the houses to three-floor flats. There are families living in each of those floors, and it is, very walkable and near downtown shopping, all sorts of areas. Those, of course, are very charming. It's very old back there, so these are old colonial, or Victorian-style houses, and that. I have a business downtown in that area, and the charm and the character is really important. I think that's part of our job as commissioners, to make sure that any projects that come through continue to reflect the nature, the charm, and the character of this community. That's part of the design guidelines. That's part of, I don't think we would have sort of the massive blocky glass, modern looking structures that they might be doing in downtown San Luis Obispo. It isn't in character with this community. But Joe?
But the more I think, I'll start with the general thoughts and then get to the more specific. And my thoughts have evolved considerably over the what in my case have been a number of years. You know, I sorely wish that an issue like this, which goes so much to intimate and core values of the citizens of Morro Bay, were actually their decision, that it could be a vote of the citizens of Morro Bay, but unfortunately it falls to this body and to the city council, so I have to recognize the situation we're in. I can remember when it first came before the Planning Commission, I was dismayed that such a large area of the city was being considered for this kind of an upgrade in the height. And I thought that the only really commonsensical way to approach this would be to be sort of an experiment on a small scale and to see what the reaction of the development community was and the reaction of the Morro Bay citizens community, and in fact what architects could come up with. I certainly still feel that now. I think that 75 lots is not an experiment. 75 lots is an installment in a commitment to a plan. So in any event, it has to be fewer than that. But my thinking has even evolved further than that, though, in that the downtown area is so important that it really merits something more than a, if you will, one-size-fits-all kind of approach. I mean, we really need to look at each property that would be developed in this fashion to a higher height and see if it really if it's really appropriate in view of what's behind it, what's across from it, what's next to it. Does it mean that the building is being demolished or refurbished or added to? How valuable is the building that might be replaced in terms of its historical and cultural significance? So I'm in favor of switching gears, if you will, scaling down the number of lots that we might focus on, and really kind of conducting a study to determine, you know, what the eligible 15 or 20 parcels might be best suited for an experiment, okay? With respect to the 37 feet, and I'm also mindful of the fact that there's an additional 6 feet that's available for the necessary infrastructure, be it elevators or air conditioning units or solar panels, and that usually involves some sort of a parapet that could easily be 3 or 4 feet higher. And pertaining to the question I asked earlier, 37 feet is a generous allotment for a 3-story structure. Perhaps we could pare it down a little bit more to 36 or 35. I realize it's not much of a change, but all changes are significant. I'm also aware, this is a thought that occurred to me while I was listening to some of the conversations, that I believe in the ordinance for short-term vacation rentals, we've made an exception and that they're not restricted in commercial developments or mixed-use developments. But that really does defeat the purpose of increasing the height so that we can build residential, which will provide us with more affordable housing. I would hate to find out that those simply turned into vacation rentals. I would absolutely prohibit 4-story structures. That would be, you know, a sabotage of what we were trying to achieve. I don't believe that that's a real practicality, but perhaps it would relieve some people's fears if we made that explicit. Let's see, anything else I think that's all that I would say, other than to just emphasizing that we want to get very, very specific where we contemplate allowing this additional height.
Scott, can I ask, based on Joe's comments, which I really agree with in terms of the vacation rentals, if we were to approve or allow something like this, could we prohibit them from being vacation rentals, since the purpose is to add housing?
You could, if that's the purpose. The purpose may not be to add housing.
True.
Right? I mean, the purpose may be to assist with, some investment in the downtown. So vacation rentals would provide that if you put them there. They would also provide the things that our business owners have asked for, and that's people in the downtown. I would prefer them to be people that live on residents up here, absolutely, but to some extent, it provides people on the street that are, servicing or visiting the businesses that are down there, and it creates the thing that we've been talking about for a very long time, like since I got here 8 years ago, about like, what do we do to help out the businesses in the downtown to help them stay open a little bit later? So, that's been a long-standing conversation we've been having, and so it does one of those things. Now, I'm not saying it's the right answer or the wrong answer. I'm just saying that's also part of it.
Okay.
So, but you definitely could condition it. You definitely could add, language in here that doesn't allow them to be vacation rentals, for sure.
Okay, thank you. Mike, do you have any? No? How about Bill?
So I'm going to take a second and try to step back and frame the issue. And to start, I want to thank everyone who came tonight and who wrote in. And when I ask you guys to stand up, it's not a stand-up vote. What it is to show the interest and the passion of why we're doing this. And I want to thank the folks who came in support of the height, because yours is an important point. What I see here is a balance between two issues. Everybody, I don't want to make fun of all the meetings that they've had, because those meetings made a difference. I think the previous commissions have gotten us to a point where what we see is that we want to vitalize downtown. We can't ignore that. The question is how we do it. The issues of preserving the character of Morro Bay are absolutely critical. I mean, the last thing we want to do is throw the baby out with the bathwater. The town is beautiful, it's got scale, it makes us different and distinct. All of you have said it. Next point, zoning can be a very blunt tool. In other words, it's like trying to build a sculpture only with a hammer. You need more tools than one. As well-intended as I think the previous commissions were and all the meetings, I find this zoning to be a blunt tool. In other words, I think a number of you mentioned this. I think, who was it? Christian Evans, Judith Law. If you incentivize and you allow for 37 feet, I think you're incentivizing knocking down one-story buildings on Main Street. And that, I think, is a problem. The question is, how do we do both? How do we incentivize development and vitalization without losing the qualities that we all really love? If we did this, I've seen other cities where incentives that were well-meaning have killed neighborhoods, transformed them, not intended, but have transformed them in a bad way. So I'm going to actually suggest something sort of along the lines that Joe said, that what we need to do is take where we are and make a more precise tool to see if we can do both, to see if we can find ways to vitalize without incentivizing losing our history and our character, our context, really. And what I'm going to suggest, there are tools that I've seen in other cities that have worked well, where we set up something called a design district, where we can kind of come in and we can carefully look at individual lots. We can look at buildings that we don't want to lose because of their character. I think there's a way to create this design district so without the blunt tool of zoning, which says, yes, you can build to 37 feet, we can find ways to add density, housing, to vitalize at night, to vitalize otherwise, to sort of, I think, promote the economy of our city without sacrificing the character of our city. I'm suggesting that, Scott, we take this out of the current zoning plan, leave the zoning the way it is now, and we go one more round where we try to get that more precise tool. I'm going to suggest that we do a subcommittee from the commission to work with staff to explore the idea of the design district, to look at its scope, to look at its scale, to look at things, and these jargon, but they mean good things. Form zoning is a good way to consider downtown. Somebody said mixed use is passé, kind of a good point. I've seen it, again, as a blunt tool, not work well. So the idea would be, one, we could spend the next 6 months working on this one issue. It's really that important, and it's that hard to resolve. We can then come back, Scott, and make it an amendment to the zoning code 6 months from now, whatever, after we try to see, can we make a more articulate, well-crafted policy and tool to deal with this zoning? I guess at that point, I'd love to hear from staff.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen things just like what you're talking about, Commissioner Roshan. So, and they work fairly well in some towns, not as well in others. It kind of depends on how you put them together. Devil's in the details, as always. So yeah, I think it probably does a lot of things. It addresses some of the concern that you hear from the audience and the folks that spent their time down here with us, expressing their concerns about going to 37 feet. So if we're going to go down that road, being thoughtful about it, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, right? I think it's a good thing, and I think that's what planning commissioners are about. Mm-hmm. They're about being thoughtful about the process, listening to folks that come and express their concerns, and seeing if there's ways to address that, again, in a thoughtful manner. So I don't have concerns about that. I think it's probably a decent process, and one I think this commission could do well. So
Can I add a couple things to that?
Sure.
That might help with it. We do have basically shovel-ready historic preservation ordinance in the wings that might help, especially addressing some of those sites and character issues that we want. And the other thing is that the chamber has done a survey, and I think we're going to get a report in the next couple of weeks on a business improvement district for that downtown business area. Don't know yet what the results are, but that could be a very helpful tie-in to something like that.
A tie-in and also a reverse informant.
Yep.
If we come in and define what our character buildings might be in the abstract, that can help our historic preservation ordinance understand that history, again, is not abstract. It's not about some buildings that are older. It's about buildings that are important to our urbanism and important to our history.
Sure.
So it's not always about the architecture or the age. So if we created this design district, that would give us a great opportunity to do that. And I think it might even offer a business improvement district ways to do their work.
Right.
So it would actually, work in the reverse as well. But I do think, especially if staff is into this, what we've heard is two really strong suggestions that need to be studied and responded to. And I think if we took the time, then the community gets to respond again to what that this evolved tool might look like.
Yeah, just two things, Susan. I wanted to wait for Bill to talk before I talked because he's lived here longer. Somebody made a comment about who's lived here longer. You know what? At the end of the day, I want to be a good planning commissioner. Bill was a planning commissioner in Southern California for 8 years. I was a planning commissioner in Northern California for 8 years. It's not about how long you've been here. It's about how you do your job. So I want to do a good job. Remember I said planning is a never-ending process. So I totally agree. Maybe we're not ready to tee up height. There's other things going on now, other processes happening that will allow us more time to deal with this. So it's not going to throw this thing off very much if we just pull it out. If we were to pull it out, we could still move forward and then add it later as an amendment once we've had the time and energy and studied it as good planning commissioners should before they make decisions like this. That's why I kind of backed off, because I wanted to hear what my long-term residents had to say and get their impressions, their history, before I start making judgments on what I should do as a planning commissioner. But Bill and I, as planning commissioners, we understand that. So I believe that time is on our side as far as doing this. So we're not in a rush to do this. So I believe that we could pull height out, especially the 37-foot number, and allow us more time to study it. I've done it before, Bill's done it before, and we could do it as a subcommittee, as Bill said.
The motion would be to keep the code as is?
Yeah.
In anticipation of further study and a future amendment?
That's right.
And the beauty,
Yeah.
we wouldn't have to go to coastal commission on it.
Yeah.
Outside of, right? I mean, so we'd have the ability to do that in-house, basically.
And as of right now, Susan?
Yeah, the development standard portion of it is in the IP, so.
Yeah,
Never mind.
But as of right now, what we could do is put this now as, we don't necessarily have to take an action right now, but we've labeled this. We've labeled this, though. This is something, but when we're done with the whole 10, let's do the whole 10, because we never know what we're going to run into, right? And then we mark this as a potential amendment change, and keep it as is, but we would have to go through another process with coastal, I guess.
So yeah, I mean, what I would want, I don't, you can do it through a motion process if you want, but I'd like at least you all, I'd like to hear from all of you about the concept of what was just discussed. And if we agree, then it's fine, then we'll make the change to the code before we bring it back next time to put it back to the 30 feet, and then we'll do this as a separate process. Happy to do that, but I'd like to make sure that I have a majority of you saying the same thing.
You have two right here, so.
I need three.
I would also, just in terms of this process and assuming we are going to go to 2 meetings on it, in 2 weeks, we will likely have more comments coming from the public in response to what we've said. So I personally would like to try and get through the process, take notes on the kinds of changes we are contemplating making, but wait to actually have a motion on this, on all of the changes we might consider until we've gone through the whole process.
Could we just hear from all the commissioners in short sentences?
Sure.
Yes, no?
Sure.
Where do you want to go? Joe?
Yeah, I would enthusiastically endorse the idea of a design district.
How about the height, Joe? That's 37 feet.
Well, that would be
part
of the
Part of the
determination.
discussion.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to take a closer look, but I don't want this to be one of those things that we never actually produce something for.
You can't have it both ways. You have to say one or the other.
But if we're going to have a more intense look, I think it'd be really great to examine individual parcels. How does the historic preservation, what buildings are already designated historic? How does that impact the decision? And then I also have a concern for what our guidelines around earthquake safety is for the downtown and how that plays into some of this hazard mitigation stuff. And happy to talk about that further if needed. So I'm willing, skeptical, but willing.
Okay. How about you, Susan?
I like the idea of, further getting a subcommittee together and exploring more of what it would look like and how we could make it work so that it isn't as scary and detrimental as people are fearful that it might be. So I would like to see it have more opportunity for that kind of input.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good.
We've got support.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I just wanted to make sure I needed to have at least,
Scott, can I ask Martha to weigh in as far as, you've done all the heavy lifting. Is that a good thought, a good idea, what we're trying to do here? Or, you put this thing together. Just let it go,
Put her on the spot.
Yeah,
Why not?
Come on.
I think it sounds like everybody's supportive of it, and it's your city, so I think it sounds like a place to go.
All right.
All right. So we've put an asterisk there.
Yes.
Excellent.
Any chance, Susan, we can have a pee break?
Oh, well, I was actually looking and I was thinking, it was 7:50 a minute ago and we should probably, it's now 7:54. let's take like a 6 or 7 or 8 minute break. Restrooms, if you don't know, are through that doorway and to the right. And have a 7th inning stretch here. Everybody satisfied, ready to pull it back in? The next item up is number 4, Citywide Regulations. Includes more defined standards such as for increased fence heights in front and street side setbacks, updated regulations for accessory structures, updated standards provide more clarity on regulations. So this was another one of the topics that had a lot of comment and feedback on it. So, who wants to go first in public comment on this item? We got people jumping. You know, when you're going to come back,
Just
you
get
might
it
as well
over
talk
with, you
every
know?
time you can.
I enjoy being up here.
We like having you. Welcome again.
Yep. David Nelson, I'm from Morro Bay. Yeah, I'm against these fences. They're just not necessary. I mean, they look stupid. You have one neighbor with a 5-foot fence, for what? I'll give you a break, that's all I got.
Thanks, David. Next person.
Good evening, my name is Dustin Barnhart. I'm a homeowner here in Morro Bay, and I'd just like to voice my support for the increased height fences. Many neighborhoods in Morro Bay, including where we own in North Morro Bay, have very small yard areas. We talked about the setbacks earlier of having 2 to 3 feet between eaves and between homes. That really just leaves very small runs and basically no yard spaces. We didn't design these homes, we didn't build these homes, but these are the homes that we live in now. So the area in front of our home is our side yard, it is our backyard, it's our front yard, it's all of these things. And we want the ability to enjoy those spaces with a sense of privacy and a sense of solace in our properties. Beyond that, there's a matter of safety. There has been increasing crime rates. There have been several property crimes in our area, and having a 3-foot fence provides virtually no safety at all. It can be stepped over, it can be easily climbed. It provides basically no obstruction and makes what should be our private property become public property very quickly. And, you know, we value the safety and the privacy this provides. I understand the need for a sense of community, but I also understand the need for our own security within our homes for our families.
Thanks so much. And before we get our next public comment, AGP, I am seeing a check device power sign on the screen. I'm just wondering if we're still live for the community. Anthony?
We are still live in
Okay.
here. Let's go ahead and check that monitor.
Okay,
Please stand by.
Thank you.
Susan, a quick comment. This is about fence height and the auxiliary unit as well.
Yeah,
So
it's
the
about accessory structure.
accessory structure.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
And could we just clarify the what's proposed in the draft?
Sure.
To raise heights from 3 feet to 4 feet, or to 5 feet with open air.
So I think it's, previously, it was allowed to do 3 feet to 4 feet with 50% open, whether that's lattice or, I suppose, plexiglass, some kind of viewing. Okay, and now it's proposed to go from 4 feet solid up to 5 feet with half of the
With the
exposure.
50% open piece. So yeah,
50%.
so basically it increases both by a foot.
Okay. Does that clarify? Okay. All right, we can have our next public commenter.
Hello. My husband and I moved in with my parents and lived for 8 years in a single small bedroom, working 100-hour weeks to finally be able to afford to buy our dream home in Morro Bay. We saved every single penny. William hand-sourced every single piece of wood for our fence from Brazil. It got lost on a boat. We had to get another shipment. We had to wait months for our wood, months for our contractor to finally build the fence of our dreams. We've been victims of crime. I woke up at 3:30 in the morning to 4 men stealing my catalytic converter. I couldn't sleep for months. My fence has been the one thing in this world that I feel like I'm okay. It's my safety net, it's my security, and it sounds stupid and absolutely ridiculous, which I absolutely understand. We've had mail stolen from our house. The way our home's laid out, we have no backyard. I have 3 feet. My front yard is all I have. So someone, to quote, somebody said, we're hermits and doomsdayers. I'm the furthest from that. I love my neighbor, and I love my community.
Thank you so much for your comments. Kristen?
Kristen Headland, North Morro Bay. Can I get clarification? Is this on encroachments into setbacks as far as sheds and ADUs?
As far as sheds, yes. Yeah.
Yes?
It includes sheds and the fence height issue, yes.
Okay. So I would like to say that we are not in favor of allowing sheds to be built on the property line. The lots in North Morro Bay are 40 by 60 feet in size. The setbacks between homes is only 3 feet per lot. North Morro Bay had 3 fires that caused fire damage to a neighbor's home. Like there was 3 separate fires, and all fires caught the house next door on fire. There are 2 homes in North Morro Bay that have sheds that sit on the property line. The owners have submitted applications to turn these sheds into accessory dwelling units. Having an accessory dwelling unit on the property lot line could be a fire hazard. We, the residents that live on the island streets, are now concerned about our homes catching fire due to these accessory dwelling buildings that will be built on the lot line. Please do not change the zoning code to allow sheds and ADUs to be built on the property line. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Heidi Bea. I second that opinion, and I also want to note that I had a dispute with my neighbor over a shed that was built on our property line, and I had to pay a lot of money for a boundary definition, a survey, so that they would understand that they were encroaching on my property line. So I think that there has to be some kind of setback, because a lot of the properties don't have clear boundaries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Again, Paul Donnelly. Like I mentioned earlier about the not knowing where the property line is when you build a permanent structure that close, and there's a lot of properties in this town that have that problem. I'm a professional land surveyor licensed here in Hawaii, and I can tell you for sure there's been a lot of surveyors and then hiring attorneys over dispute over lot lines. And so be careful when you build a permanent structure that close, not knowing exactly where that line is.
Thank you. Ms. Winholtz?
Amen to the lot line setback being necessary. And then I would share 2 stories with you from people that have told me they weren't coming but wanted me to share their stories. One was a couple that had someone buy a house behind them, and the guy immediately put a shed right on the property line. The guy did not report him, even knowing there should have been a setback, because he wanted to be a good neighbor. So 5 years later, the new fence that he had just put in was now rotten because the man slanted his roof towards his house. So setbacks are real important. And then the second story that I'm giving you is from another family where they actually live in Phoenix, but they come here 6 months, they're there 6 months. And their story is that where they live, a security comes by not having tall fences, because then you can see who's approaching, or other people can check out your house if they know you're gone. And so it's important for safety in a different way to not have such high fences. And I think it's also important to note that this ordinance allows the discretion of 2 additional feet by the planning director. And so that for sure needs to be discretionary, or at someone else's wishes, or maybe it needs to be different in North Morro Bay or South Morro Bay. But I think this is another one of those issues, the fence height, that needs to be pulled back a little bit.
Thank you. Mr. Garcia.
I'm Ryan Garcia. I wrote some notes earlier to you or email. Hopefully you guys read it, so I don't want to repeat all that. But I want to agree with what Betty just mentioned. We have fence heights, but now we're going to kind of do away with them by allowing a shed to be built there that is 8 feet tall next to a, 6.5 feet tall fence. The setback is really, really important. Right now I've got a shed that's on our property. It just towers over our fence, and it doesn't belong there. And so some of you have seen it. Some of you guys, others haven't seen it, but if you come and see it, I invite you to see it. It doesn't belong there. It was supposed to be there, well, the rule was supposed to change in 3 months according to Scott Graham. It's been 14 months, it's still there. It doesn't belong there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Can I make another comment or just the one?
One on each topic. But feel free to email us if you have another comment. Yeah.
Hi, Linda Donnelly, Morro Bay. I just want to speak out against the ordinance or the change to allowing ADU units. We're right? We're talking about that up against fence lines? We're not.
This is more about accessory units like a shed that
Oh,
would
okay.
be
Well,
against a fence line.
I'm still speaking out against that.
Okay.
Setbacks are really important to lot lines. And like Paul Donnelly just said, you know, as a surveyor, this town, you could start at one end of the block, and by the time you got to the far end, you know, you will find that you don't own the property you own that you think you own, because of the ranchos and whoever surveyed this 70 years ago or 100 years ago. So, and I live on one of those blocks. You know, I'm not going to about to fight my neighbor over 4 feet, 10 feet. So I would just suggest you all take that into consideration.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Next.
Hi, so I sent in an email about fence height, and it's kind of funny. Can I get a raise of hands who here has a back garden? Does it, a back garden?
A garden in the back.
A garden in the back. That's fenced in. A backyard. Nobody has a backyard.
Yeah, we see a
Fenced in?
few hands.
You have a fenced in back, so I don't.
Okay.
I have a yard at the front of the house only because of the way it was built, and that's why I'm for the fence height. Miss Winsholt, if that's correct, sorry, came to my house yesterday to deliver some mail, and my dog was in the front garden. My dog, if this was a small fence, could have easily leapt the fence. I mean, it's not aggressive, but could have bit, which is why we, you know, it's for security. We don't need people coming to our house, and the fence height's important for animals and security and protection, and that's why we're for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Susan, he said he wrote something to us. What's his name? The
Yeah,
individual?
what's your name, sir?
That we can read that.
Okay, thank you.
William, thank you.
Townsley. Any other public comment? Welcome.
Hi, I'm back. I just thought I'd mention, because I have mixed feelings about the fences. I think they're in character with historic California to have a fence in front. My great-grandparents built and lived at the Cooper House in Monterey, which has a fence all the way around it. And it's nice. It keeps everything secure. And however, they can block people's views if they're in the front in a town like this. So it's almost like I think it should be done on an individual basis, depending on, you know, people's view shed. So,
okay, thank you. Any other comments from the public? Anthony, do we have anybody online or via Zoom or on the phone?
Thank you, Chair Stewart. Currently, I see one hand raised.
Well,
And Guy Hall, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you.
Thank you.
Okay, Guy, you should be unmuted.
Okay, great. Thank you. My name is Guy Hall. I'm a resident of Morro Bay, and I concur with the 3 or 4 people that said we need higher fence heights. for mainly the reasons they stated, safety, security. In addition to that, we have no room in our backyard. We have people that look inside our backyard, our neighbors, you know, and we have a daughter that's 12 years old that's in a wheelchair, and she would like to go out in the front yard and have a place where she can have some privacy, but yet we really can't do that with a 3-foot fence. So in addition to that, we need to allow for higher fence heights than what is put in the current code. And that's common practice in the neighborhood already. At least half of the houses and fences in our neighborhood exceed the 5-foot fence height. And for people to say you need 3-foot fences, it's gonna, then the code enforcement people could be pretty busy with those folks that are in excess of that. So I recommend we go higher than what's recommended. And I would like to see that continue again for the safety and security and privacy of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hall. Appreciate you calling in. Do we have anybody else, Anthony?
Thank you, Chair Stewart. Currently, I do not see any raised hands left in the queue.
All right, let's close public comment on this item. Back to the commissioners. Who wants to start? Joe, he's ready to go.
Are we talking about both the accessory units and
we're talking about fence heights and the setbacks with sheds and so on.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So with respect to fences, again, I see this as a longstanding community value of the welcoming nature of the Morro Bay community. 3- and 4-foot fences as they exist now are, 1, decorative, 2, I suppose they provide some sort of security for pets in the front yard. But in terms of security from wrongdoing, I don't think anyone can argue that they're effective barriers. What they do signify is, this is my property, stay on your side and off my property, which is probably not the kind of value that we would want to encourage. But more importantly, you know, to some extent, I sympathize with people who, for lack of backyards, want to enjoy the front yards with some privacy. However, there has been notice or constructive notice as to what the long-standing city ordinance was with respect to fences, and they bought that with either actual knowledge or constructive knowledge. So I think that should be preserved. With respect to the additional 2 feet, you know, I can imagine situations, extraordinary situations where a higher fence is called for, but I would very much like that discretion to be part of this planning commission, in part because I imagine that these are sort of politicized decisions, and I think we're better suited to bear the burden of that. And I'm also for such a fundamental change in the community, raising the fence height, I would need to see some significant evidence of why we should do that. Really a preponderance of evidence. Lots of people explain to me why we should increase the fence height, and I don't see that. With respect to the storage units, I remember being told that this originated because in North Morro Bay, because the lots are substandard in size, there is a real shortage of space where you can store things. So I'm prepared to say in substandard lot sizes of perhaps 3,000 square feet, perhaps that's acceptable, perhaps, and I'd like to hear what the rest of the commission says. But with respect to standard size lots and larger lots, I can recall in one particular instance that was brought to my attention where a sizable storage unit was placed in the 3 or 4 foot setback, and the roof overhung the fence separating the properties, and the slanted roof resulted in rain dripping into the neighbor's property, and he could see it over the fence. And there were some concerns about safety and what was being stored in this structure, while all the time, that neighbor who had the storage structure there had ample room in his backyard to situate it in a place that was less inconvenient for his neighbors. So I don't favor that. And as I said, I'd like any discretion as to the fence height being with us.
Mike, you want to go next?
A comment on the discretionary part, Scott, if you could give us the 2-foot discretion.
2-foot discretion, what you're typically dealing with in situations like that is retaining walls.
Okay.
Right, you know, like you could have a retaining wall that's 4 feet tall. So that's the maximum height of your fence. Although then at that point, depending on, you know, whether it was accessible by a person or not, you'd have to put a guardrail on top of it. I mean, so there's a lot of, but it's really related to that. It's really related to retaining walls and like, what is the actual fence height based on slopes.
Okay, that's all I had.
Bill, you want to go next?
The fences are kind of a difficult issue, especially front yard fences. I think Guy Hall said, and I'm asking Scott, that I think he's talking about North Morro Bay, that there is a large number, even a majority of front yards fenced in.
So I think that's what he was referring to. I mean, I don't, lots of folks have fences, lots of folks don't.
But over 50% that don't meet code?
No, that's not true.
No.
Yeah, that's not true. I mean, we probably do have active right now somewhere in the neighborhood of about 20 code enforcement cases related to fences in North Morro Bay because somebody complained about one and then we sent a letter out and that person went around and took note of all the neighbors that had fences, and so we're still in active investigation mode, but it's not 50%.
So I guess a couple of things. One is, I think William, who only has a front yard, so there is the variance process where he could come to the city and say, I've only got a front yard, this is why I need it for that kind of protection. So there is the opportunity in extreme situations, Scott, to do this.
You know, variance processes, you know, that's expensive. Anytime you bring something to the planning commission, it costs quite a bit of money because you're paying for the staff time to prepare the staff reports and bring it here. So, and one might equate the expense of coming here related to the expense of the fence to maybe be an issue. I'm pretty cognizant of that. You know, it's an inexpensive construction project that's going to cost you almost as much to get to the planning commission. So having some nuance with how we deal with that would probably be a good idea. Maybe.
That might be helpful. I guess what the issue is for me is there's safety of two kinds. One of the typical urban laws is that safety comes from eyes on the street is the thing. In other words, when you have windows that can see the street is not isolated from the house. And this is a kind of a urban intent that is kind of practiced all over the country, which is to protect the public nature of streets by keeping awareness, windows on the streets. The other thing is that part of our job is to really be about public space. So the hope is to balance, I think, private needs, private safety with public needs and public safety. I think that's where these 2 points meet. That's why I guess I ask about the variance process. So if, you know, Bill's got only 1 yard in the front, that seems a reason to consider it. Maybe there's a way to process these that's less expensive and not as demanding and onerous to go through planning commission.
It's a good point, Commissioner Roshan. So it could be something along the lines of an exception process related to just fences. It's approved at the staff level where we notice, right? Because you probably want the neighbors to know as opposed to coming to maybe the planning commission. And then the appeal opportunity is always available to folks if they don't like the decision that's rendered by staff. So I guess I'd like to look at this with that
exception process issued so that someone like Bill actually can go and request it in a modest way, get attention, and see if we can do it. My leanings is I think the public streets are really important to the neighborhoods too. And it's very hard for me to preference the private over the public. So I would probably stay away from the 4 and 5. I think that we stay with the 3 and 4. On the accessory unit in the back, I'm with Joe. I think if you're on a substandard lot, you should consider the option of a 0 lot line. That seems reasonable to me, but if I have a big full lot, I'm still going to want to put my storage unit on the edge because it gives me more room in the backyard, which I don't think is a fair thing to the neighbor. So I guess I would suggest for the Commission's consideration that a substandard lot could allow for a 0 lot line on the sheds. I think some of the things we might add with that is surveys. I don't know if you could require a survey. In other words, if you were going to install a storage and accessory unit on the property line, you'd be required to show the evidence to the city that that's on your side of the property. So at least a partial survey would be required to do that. That seems maybe reasonable and fair to me. I think other things have to be very clear. It's illegal to drip your water on a neighbor's property. That's a really bad practice. And the city, you know, I'm sure enforces that. But we need to be very clear that storage units, if they're going to happen, have to keep the water on your own property. It can't be shared. I also think maybe some guidelines around the materials that storage units are, so you don't get a big old, you know, plastic thing as your edge. That maybe it has to, and I'm not trying to design it right here, but somehow there should be a consideration of what it looks like to the neighbor.
Asia?
Yeah, so there's not separate design guidelines like this for different neighborhoods in town. There aren't like neighborhood-specific plans that can address.
There are not.
Okay. I don't know if that's something that is possible or something that a neighborhood can bring before the planning department, or no?
I mean,
our job.
Yeah, I mean, I guess would need to hear a little bit more about what you're trying to get at.
I just
Commissioner
mean,
King.
with, it sounds like, you know, North Morro Bay has really different needs than maybe other developments in the city as far as what their fences and setbacks look like, or where they can put their sheds. And
That is the case, and what you experience in North Morro Bay is they have smaller lots there than maybe in the south end of town, right? So you get lots that are 4,000, 3,000, under 3,000 square feet. And so what that looks like when you put a house on it and you're meeting your minimum setbacks of 5 at the rear and 3 on the sides, it's basically a walkway around it, right? Yeah. So the only area there's, you know, really space to put someplace to sit outside is in your front yard, right? And so that's what you're hearing the concern about is we'd like to have taller fences, a little more privacy, because that's where our outdoor living space is. It's not in the 3-foot walkway that goes around the house. You know, that's not a living space really, right? So that's the concern you're hearing, and you know, whether you agree with it or not is up to you guys, but that's the concern you're hearing, and that's the concern that we've heard going back years, right? We've been doing this process for quite a while, and it's the maybe different faces, but the same arguments and the same concerns raised now versus what led to us developing the policies for sheds at 0 lot line and for fences that were to be taller. I would say previous planning commissions struggled with the fence height piece. Previous planning commissions, you know, were very much into that street connection, but then found some of the safety concerns, you know, expressed to be somewhat compelling, so that's where the height came from. But then we also have policies that allowed you to kind of like push things a little bit more towards the street as far as covered porches and things, where we had setback requirements that limited that in some instances. So there's a struggle there inside the code with related policies to, you know, really wanting that street connection and then trying to be I guess helpful to those folks that have concerns related to maybe security and fencing in their front yards.
Yeah, I guess I was just looking for, is there an alternative process for the neighborhood as a whole to address their issues independently of the entire city?
No, I mean, not currently, there's not. I mean, you'd have to develop a separate policy to deal with the areas. I mean, we have, I would say that conversation related to all kinds of different, development standards in general. Yeah. That was a conversation that was discussed a few different times at the General Plan Advisory Committee level. And by previous planning commission was like, do we want to do development standards, design guidelines by neighborhood? I mean, it's a huge effort and a big lift, and where do you come up with the money to do all that? But that was conversations that were had. So it's not something that's what you're talking about is not something that hasn't been discussed previously. It is a concept that has been batted around a bit.
Can I just add just to clarify procedurally what you're discussing, and then the comment about the is there a process for fence height exceptions? We have a modifications chapter that's new in the code, and so the modifications chapter would be that process, and I think that was more the question by Commissioner Roshan.
Modification is administrative?
It's administrative, and but it would require noticing.
Noticing, but no public hearing?
No public hearing because of the, really because of the small scale nature of the request is generally how that's derived.
Thanks, Cindy.
Hey, Asia, a quick thought. Based on what we've all heard, we could let this decision ride to the next meeting. And I'd be very interested if you guys would share your addresses. I'd love to drive by and see it and see if there is a case we could make for not citywide zoning, but neighborhood. Like a neighborhood district. Yeah. My inclination is not, because I think the public safety and public spaces are our issues. But I'd sure like to look at North Morro Bay and see. If everybody's up to that, I'd be willing to do it. We can do it individually.
Yeah, and Bill, I wanted to say this, but I didn't. But I did support Joe's recommendation for substandard lots. So having modifications administratively versus a variance process that requires hearing and coming before the commission. So I did support that concept of substandard versus a standard lot. The substandard should get more, breathing room as far as fences is what I'm trying to say. If that would make it easier for staff to make decisions when it comes to fences. But I just think that we're not ready to make that decision yet, but I do support that concept of substandard versus standard lots. And fence heights.
So, but we're talking about an administrative decision for substandard lots with the.
I was going to include it in the zoning, where you could do it by right on a substandard lot.
And in fact, Bill, I was going to ask Cindy's, I was going to ask you, when you talked about modifications, does that apply to all lots or substandard or all, because we're talking about that right now.
So the modifications, that's just the process.
Oh.
So when Scott said it could be a process where there's public notice, the director makes a decision, and that decision is appealable, what he was describing was the modification process. So that process is there. You would just have to assign it to the fence standard.
So Martha, if we said substandard lots, that becomes citywide, and you could do it by right on a substandard lot. You don't need a modification if we change the zoning.
Correct.
Yes, yeah.
So that would be one way to handle it, but the modification process is available. We would make that available to any lot if they could make a convincing case to staff.
Yeah, you would make it available to the fence requirements. We would, reference it there, and then we would refer back to the modification. Right. So it would say, for these things, we have the process. It is the modification process. Right. That's what we're using. So yeah.
So if you're in a standard lot, you could do a modification and still get a 0 lot line if you had a really good reason.
Correct.
Yeah. I guess that's what we're targeting.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and if I could just offer one thing to Commissioner King's comment about standards for different areas. In a way, your current code has that, in that it has the RS1, RS2 districts, which kind of follow these not exact neighborhoods, but I think generally smaller lots, larger lots, and then, or medium size and then larger. And we took that concept of unique setbacks for those areas and carried that forward, but tied it to lot size. So you could do, and that breakdown is 2,500 square feet and lower, 2,501 to maybe 4,000 or something close like that, and then 4,000 and above. So you could tie these unique fence and accessory structure setback standards to that as well. That structure is already set up there, and I think that would address the concerns with the fences on the small lots.
So I have a few comments.
I think I still need a clarification, though.
Okay.
So are we talking about an administrative process just for the fences or for fences and these accessory sheds?
I think we're saying that the suggestion is, which was yours, that we would do substandard lots would be by right to do the accessory on the lot line.
Right.
But to your point, that if you have a big yard, it's, you know, to your advantage, but not to your neighbors to put it on the lot line. But if you have a regular, not a substandard lot, and you still wanted to go through a process, you could do that. But on the fences, we're saying that on the front, my encouragement would be to protect the streets and the neighborhoods by keeping the transparency from the house to the street. But if there's an unusual case like Bill's house, he could do it through a modification process by going to staff and say, I have no backyard, so therefore I need a high fence.
Right. But so there's an implication that in both of those cases where there's an absence of a lot of complaining neighbors, that would be taking as supporting granting the variance, which really places an onus on the neighbors to sort of go along to get along, despite what they may actually feel is the validity.
You're talking with the modification process, Jeff?
Yeah. It's somehow, if you will, removing the responsibility from us and placing it on the neighborhood. And I don't think I really support that.
So I have a couple comments. One, in terms of sheds, I'm not sure I would support anything on any lot line for a shed. I think they need to be off the lot lines, and especially in the dense, smaller lot neighborhoods where everybody is one on top of another. I think that is a safety issue. I could.
How is it a safety issue?
Because if there is some sort of fire that happens with that shed, it just hops immediately to the adjacent property. So if you have, and then the other issue that was raised too is, if you're only allowing a certain height of a fence, but you allow an 8-foot shed, that's.
I mean, the fence height is 6.5 feet, it's 1.5 feet taller.
Okay.
So, and quite frankly, if we don't accommodate these things, it's an enforcement nightmare. There are hundreds of these out there. I mean, I'm not saying that lightly. There are hundreds of them out there that would be non-compliant. And many of them are in these small lots in town where they don't have any other place to put them. Some of these homes don't have garages. It's the kind of some of the original homes from Morro Bay. They're second homes, beach homes for folks, coming out of the Central Valley type thing. I mean, so they don't have storage like other people have. That's the concern. When we started looking into this, when council directed us to do proactive code enforcement, it came up as a huge issue. Yeah. And then council said, well, okay, well, why don't we back off on that and pause for a little while and let you guys address it through zoning? And I said, okay, we'll do that. So that's the only thing I would say about that. I mean, I understand exactly what you're saying, but these things are solving real problems that people have related to storage and lack thereof, really. So.
And I'm not completely steadfast on this, Susan, but if we had a condition where the accessory dwelling unit has to be a certain distance from the house, linearly, not a distance from the property line. In other words, the chances of fire from a shed catching a house if it's 15 feet away are unlikely. So there could be guidelines that did that. But also in small yards, not only are they there and do people need them, but if you leave that little 2 feet thing, do you know what goes in there? In that 2 feet between the shed and the fence? Everything, and everything lives there. And I think also then you have no enforcement. So then somebody builds one without a permit, and the water's going the wrong direction because they didn't follow the guidelines, or it's too close to the house. So I guess I would consider this, because I'm with Scott on this. I think I'd rather look to the reality of what's happening and find a safe way to do it. But if you restrict it to substandard lots, I think there's a fairness there as a way to split the issue.
Could see that. The other thing I wanted to mention and sort of sympathize with folks who feel the need for these higher fences. And 4 feet, you can still see over with families, with wanting a play area, having no backyard. But I also think some of the impacts, and I've heard from neighbors up there in terms of vacation rentals, that your neighborhood is not necessarily a neighborhood of, a stable community, that there are a lot of people coming and going that you don't know, and that's a challenge, and I really respect and understand that challenge for folks. So, again, I can understand that desire and respect that it was added into the zoning code to allow people to increase that fence height a little bit. Not everybody's going to want to do it. Some people will. In the best of all worlds, we have those neighborhoods where everybody has a front porch and they share coffee and pastries together. But we're in a kind of a different community than that now. So I don't know how we change that. Those are my comments. I definitely, boy, if there's, I would love to see the sheds at least out of the sides of homes. And
You can't put one in between the house and the fence.
they are.
Yeah, see, that shouldn't be allowed.
They are
right?
between houses and fences in the next door. Dr. Garcia's
Well, that's why we
place
need
is
a
exactly
legitimate policy,
like
I
that.
think, so we can have enforcement.
Because I could see
Yeah.
the shed being on the back fence that
No,
butts
that's
up
what would,
against a
that's
back
all that would be
fence.
allowed, is on the back
But the
fence.
side lot, I think that gets you too close to the.
Scott, am I saying this wrong?
So yeah, right now, there's no limitation there. Although we do have limitations to what you can put in the side yard. So if somebody was putting there and you couldn't walk, say, around it, or it was creating issues like that, potentially there's a problem there. I guess what we could do, I'm going to test the case here. So you wouldn't want it in the side yards, these 3 and 5 foot side yards, right? You don't want them there when the side yard is abutting the home. Once you get past that, you're really in the rear yard, and then it would be fine to put it along the side when it's not adjacent to the home. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, to clog up the side yard is a safety issue. That works as a fire exit from the windows. Every bedroom is required to have a window at a certain height so you can exit it.
Yeah, correct.
If there's a fire in the home. To fill in the side yard defeats that option.
It's one of the things that we look at.
And in the case of this one particular house, it is blocking the window of the house next door, and it's very close. The shed is right up against the fence, and it goes over the fence, water comes in.
Well, I would encourage us, if we're going to consider this, that I think we might be better off with regulation and permits to do this in a way that keeps it out of the side yard, keeps it a certain distance from the house for fire safety, requires that the water goes on your own property, not your neighbor's, and maybe guidelines even around the materials of the sheds themselves. So I don't know what staff thinks about that. If we could come up with an outline of that, and then again, I think we should consider this maybe at the next meeting, because I really do want to go see the streets and see if I can be convinced.
I would agree with that.
You know, and this is all part of the same thing we're going to be thinking about when we come back as far as substandard versus standard lots. So we're going to be covering all this when we do this.
And then Joe and I can
Perfect.
argue that one.
Yeah, good.
Okay?
And it would be an administrative process for substandard. So we've already kind of talked about that modification process that doesn't require variance, you know, coming to the commission. So we're going to talk about all that when we come back.
Yep.
So Scott, right now, the zoning code doesn't have those guidelines around accessory buildings.
It has setback requirements for them, but allows them to be at 0 setback.
But we don't, the water thing is covered by something else.
Oh, the
but
water thing
maybe-
is, yeah, it is covered. We don't need to do that. It's covered by state law.
But we should still be clear on if you're getting a shed. People don't think about that. They don't really think that, you know, you're.
Yeah, I
putting
mean,
water
on
in
the,
neighborhood.
in the part of Mr. Garcia, I mean, we had to have the neighbor redirect the water.
But, so the distinction on the side yard, which would not be allowed, the distinction of, you know, I don't know, distance from the house, for example, for fire safety?
There's no, I mean, I've talked to the fire department ad nauseum on this. There's no concern on their part about a distance from the house. It's not really an issue for them.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so, I mean, if you guys want to do it, we can. It's just not a concern of the fire department.
The draft code does specify minimum 6 feet from the house. There is that in there.
yeah.
If it's a roofed accessory structure,
There you
8
go.
feet or taller and up to 120 square feet, it has to be 6 feet from the house.
okay.
No, if it's 8 feet in height or more, or 120 square feet or greater in size,
Or greater, yeah.
shall be at least 6 feet from any dwelling, either
Yeah.
on your property or neighboring.
And I guess I'm considering that we might consider that even for a smaller unit, so that I don't know if the fire department's right or wrong, but I am, you know, aligned with Susan that, you know, let's be conscious of a fire issue. I guess my final thing is I just feel better that it's legal than illegal. And if it's happening all over, which I think it probably is, let's make it work.
Okay, so again, we will pull all this stuff together in our next meeting on this.
And could you guys get us addresses, give it to Scott,
Yeah.
and then, well, give us your address, because I want to see if how I would
and
feel.
you can do it through Scott, and it'll be private, so.
Thank you.
You don't have to worry about that. Well, public comment on that one is closed right now, but again, we're not making any final decisions tonight, so please email us with anything further, additional, you know, thoughts you've had, because I know that's how the mind works, you know? You hear things and you think of more. So, let's move on to number 5, non-conforming. This was additions to non-conforming structures would no longer require a CUP by Planning Commission, but would allow a non-conforming setback to be maintained or extended. The intent of this is to incentivize reuse of existing housing stock, utilizing affordable by design principles, instead of the historic pattern of demolishing and reconstructing of small homes with a new and much bigger home. Also serves to shorten and streamline the permitting process. Do we have any public comment on that one? Seems like any commissioner comment? Seems like a change we probably would all go along with. We're halfway done, guys. Pardon? Oh, yes, sorry, thank you for that. Anthony, did we have anybody on the phone for item 5 or Zoom?
Thank you, Chair Stewart. Currently, Guy Hall just raised his hand.
All right, let's hear from Guy.
Guy, you should be unmuted.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was raising my hand to reply to Scott Graham's remarks about there's not 50% of the houses with the higher fences. So I'm just going to say this since I got your time here. You know, drive around the neighborhoods, not just in the north side, but the 20 houses that he's investigating are because people complained about those, but they're not enforcing the fences that are higher than 5 feet or higher than the regulation currently. And you know, when you drive around, I encourage you to drive around the neighborhood and take a look. And you'll see there's a bunch of fences that are higher than the current code, and fences that are higher than the current code, and trash cans that are not placed in containers like your code says. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. The next item is parking. Okay. We may want to be done after this one. We'll see how we do with it.
If we do this one,
It's almost 9 o'clock. So this one is about reduced parking requirements are included for both residential and non-residential uses. This includes no garage or covered parking requirements for residential uses. On-site parking still applies. This means off-street parking. So this does not say that you're allowed to have parking on the street for your home. You still have to provide a driveway that could handle 2 cars, depending on the size of the home. For commercial uses, requirements decrease to facilitate commercial reuse of buildings, encourage outdoor dining, and parking is not required in the waterfront district. Let's open this one for public comment. Ms. Winholtz.
Betty Winholtz. My concern about doing away with parking requirements on the waterfront is then you're not going to get in lieu fees. When I moved here in '86, in the general plan, there was a thing where they were anticipating collecting money and building a parking structure down by where the Maritime Museum is. Never happened. They diverted the funds to other places. So we have a parking issue on the Embarcadero. So my concern is, if you're not only you're not going to be getting parking, you're not going to be getting money. The little parking places that still exist on the dead ends of the waterfront, I know we're kind of trying to get rid of those, yet those are still the open spaces where you can see the sand spit. So when you get rid of the dead end parking, you're also getting rid of view shed. And that's the second concern I have. And then downtown, you know, there's been a variety of ideas about how to increase parking up there. I don't get rid of in lieu parking, or find us a lot and put some parking on it.
Thanks, Betty. Kristen?
Hi, Kristen Headland, North Morro Bay. I do want some clarification. Okay, so I understand that there are some applicants who want to convert their garage into an ADU. And so are you saying that you want to make it legal for people to no longer be required to have a garage and they could turn it into an ADU? And my concern for that is in North Morro Bay, we have narrow streets and a lot of houses only have single car garages, and there's no parking, there's no sidewalks, and so that's a little bit of concern for me, and those are my comments.
Appreciate that. Thanks, Kristen. Any other comments on this? We got another one.
Heidi Bea. I have a clarification issue. I don't understand parking not required in waterfront district, and also Mr. Graham mentioned paid parking along the Embarcadero, and I just wanted to say I'm against that. Right now, what I notice when I walk along the Embarcadero is that it gives the families time to park there, and the families go out and they spend a long time in Morro Bay. And once you set a time limit on that, of course you're going to get turnover, but I just think it will mess with the general ambiance of the city as a laid-back community where you can go out with your family and enjoy it instead of worrying about 2 hours and you have to move your car. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Anybody else? Anthony, do we have anybody waiting in the queue?
Thank you, Chair Stewart. Currently, I do not see any raised hands in the queue.
All right, we will close public comment on this. Oh, do we have one more? Yeah. Come on up.
Thank you. I don't even know where you begin with public parking, and I would speak to residential. We live on a street where there are apartments that don't have proper parking for everybody that lives there. And our neighbors we have a very big lot, but we have a garage that's near the street. But our neighbors have a super long driveway that they don't even use. They block it off and they park in the street. But so, you know, it's kind of like, it's almost like this, like a neighborhood issue, but it depends on where you're at in the city, right? Just like the setback, the fence lines and all that stuff you're talking about. So, I don't know, it's just, we can't even get code enforcement to come out and remove the cars that are sitting there with 3-year-old tags. So, you know, good luck.
A little frustration there. I appreciate that. All right, so now public comment is closed. Let's address, Scott, you want to briefly address the garage conversions and ADUs and the new state laws about that?
So garage conversions are already allowed.
Yep.
And this, I mean, I think all of you probably know folks with garages and they can't park cars in them and they're just used for storage. So it's this is more of a modern take on like, okay, let's not drive the design of the home, and the most prominent thing that you see on homes is often garages. Let's not drive it by the vehicle, pun intended, sort of. So that's kind of what we're looking at. We've been talking about this for a while. We've had numerous conversations with the Planning Commission on this, General Plan Advisory Committee as well. And the idea was, you know, we could probably stop driving all of our development, you know, related concepts by the vehicle and really start looking at, okay, especially now, because we have the requirement now, you can just convert it to ADUs. So if you want to build an ADU, why don't you design that into your home and have it fit in there and work? And then you still have to have your parking requirement, and you still have to have your parking requirement outside the setback.
Right.
So
Scott, if you have a house that requires 2 cars, you do the ADU, do you have to replace that garage requirement for the 2? No.
You do not.
So in a way, it's a double whammy because.
It's part of the state law that says you
No,
do
no.
not
Oh, yeah, per state
need
law.
I know.
to
But-
park a car for an ADU.
Yeah, but the fact that a house could be built or should be built without paying for a garage has the added advantage that it's hard to store stuff in a carport. Yeah.
Which means your
So-
car is likely to be in that carport.
You would think.
Yeah.
But it's at least a little more incentivized, yeah.
And just as a reminder, the requirement is still to have car space on lot, not on the
Yes.
street.
And outside of the setback.
Right.
The in lieu fees, could you tell us about those?
In lieu fees were, you know, when you're basically buying parking and not providing it. Down on the waterfront, we've had numerous conversations, you know, about requiring or not requiring parking for the development down there. I think, you know, and I think smartly, you know, the Planning Commission, the General Plan Advisory Committee have looked at the projects that have gone on down there and said, we don't want parking lots as the street frontage to these lease sites. We want storefronts, restaurant fronts, those types of things, public spaces at the street ends where that Ms. Winholtz was talking about, where where the parking spaces are now. Better uses of those spaces, would not be for vehicles. They would be for public spaces, and we don't want to block those views of the bay, Betty.
Yeah,
That's not what we want. We want to keep those open. We want to make them available and actually more public. If you create like park type spaces there that you could sit and relax and watch the water, I think that would be fantastic.
So, I mean, we create public spaces down there. I think Betty's question might be, why should a restaurant not have to contribute to that cost? Why should that restaurant get free parking?
Well, I mean, that is I think what you heard Cindy speak to this earlier, and we have all this ghost parking, this, traditional parking calculations that we do for the projects down there. And I think the Planning Commission really got tired of acknowledging that. I mean, I'll say it's weird, it's like it's funky math. And they just said, we really don't care about these. Let's get quality development down here. Let's have the development tell the story, and then it's fine not to have the parking that goes with it. You have people, usually, especially down on the waterfront, it's more of the tourist-driven area. So the folks that are going there are potentially already in town, staying somewhere and walking down there. And rarely are you coming here and going to one specific place. You're going to multiple places. You're coming here for the experience of the waterfront.
So can we split that issue? Because I think a parking requirement doesn't make sense to me down there. But the in lieu fees, I don't know if that's our job to talk about that. But it does seem odd that we would give that great benefit to the retailers down there without any costs, any fees. Like, in other words, they're getting free parking.
Well, I mean, so we'd be doing this. The moment that you require a parking requirement that they have to pay for, we're doing the same parking count that we did before. It's historical parking credits. That whole thing comes back up, and we're talking about those again. So that's the problem.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. It looks like we're letting go of parking in lieu money. But in the 12 years I've been here, I've done every single conditional use permit process that's come up, and I could count on a couple of fingers the amount of times that we've collected parking in lieu, and it is not anything that is actually producing parking in the city. The two projects I can think of, one person paid up front, the other person took 6 to 10 years to pay the money. Like, we would be likely generating, and this is speculative, but we would likely be generating more revenue through paid parking than we would from the very infrequent occurrences that parking in lieu is generated. And
Right, so parking in lieu would be a code requirement. So I'm saying maybe don't consider that, but it does seem to me that the city is providing parking without, any cost to the,
Which is why they're entertaining the idea of paid parking, is that
But then
free
that
parking
shifts,
is not free.
which is maybe okay, that shifts the cost to the visitor rather than the business. I don't know. And I don't think it's our thing. I think that's who would be, isn't that, where does that even go, the idea of revenue?
I mean, I guess it's a philosophical issue from, like, what do you feel about those? I mean, it's a valid point. I mean, Commissioner Roshan, it took me a while to get my head wrapped around, like, we're just not going to require parking down here. Like, it seems weird. It even does a little bit now. Although when you start doing the funky math that we were doing, and then I'll give you even a different example. We had the project that is Rose's Landing. They paid several in lieu fees many years ago because they had a restaurant. They did an addition to put it upstairs, and it was a restaurant that was up there. They converted it and put hotel rooms up there. Well, the parking requirement was reduced quite a bit from that thing, and we weren't giving money back. So it just sort of emphasizes the funny way we calculate parking in that location. So
It's tough because, as you say, you don't want parking. I mean, you need parking, obviously. Businesses need parking, visitors need parking. You need the parking, but the idea of taking these relatively small street-facing storefronts and saying you've got to provide 10 or 12 or 20 more spaces, where? And the parking in lieu was so extreme at $15,000 a space that if you actually charged that, many developers just said no.
Well, and quite frankly, if you're talking about, as Ms. Winholtz mentioned earlier, about building a parking structure, you're talking $60,000+ a space.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, we just did a parking study that said there's not enough demand for a parking structure, which is the issue, which is why we're looking at doing a paid parking pilot program, down on the waterfront to see what that looks like.
And I think pilot programs are great. It's worth a try. You can always take it out. You can see how it works. I don't know.
And again, I don't think this is our call, but, and I have no problem with reducing the parking. I understand why we're doing that. But I think to Betty's point, if you don't collect revenue, you're never going to be able to maintain or improve what we have, because then there's no money for the city to do this, so it becomes an impossibility. And so in a way, it's kind of self-defeating for those businesses, because if the parking starts to atrophy or it's inadequate, so I'm passing the ball. I don't think this is our point.
Yeah, well, and I mean, Commissioner Roshan, we're trying to address that through the parking study that we've did, and then the implementation thing for a paid parking pilot program, and to see, like, one, you know, we want to make sure we've been talking to our businesses down there about it, and some like it, some don't, but like trying to pilot the program to see like what it works, what it looks like, and it's the idea behind it is that it's paying for some of these things. Some of
And
the
in that
maintenance on-
study, you'll figure out what the revenue sources might be.
Yes.
And, you know, for visitors to pay, for businesses to pay, or maybe a combo, I don't know.
Could be, yeah.
Okay. Should we move on from this one? Can we do number 7 quickly, signs? I mean, boy, did I spend massive hours on that one for years, and all kinds of local meetings and business meetings and city meetings and everything else. So it's been overhauled and updated, reflects the needs of the 4 main business districts in town. It's been vetted by all those business districts in multiple meetings with those districts, and has standards for when a master sign program is required, which largely applies to the Embarcadero, although I bet, you know, there may be other situations where you have multiple businesses in the same building to make sure we don't have kind of sign blight by having a balanced program.
Yeah, it was a huge effort. We went, you know, basically door to door in the commercial districts, and you know, with the help of the chamber, and engaged all of the folks in those things multiple times, and had, you know, several meetings on it. It was a big effort. I'm actually happy to see it moving forward now and incorporated into the draft code. It was a lot of work.
Still, we will open this for public comment, because I know it's out there. No, it's not out there? Oh, bless you. All right. So I think we can
Because
move
we
on.
did the work.
I do have a
Oh,
question.
any comments, questions? Yeah, sorry. I was all excited.
I'll be
It's been a
fast.
long haul.
So I trust the sign ordinance, but I do have the question, is the zoning code or design guidelines the right place for a requirement that signage has to be a part of a building presentation to Planning Commission? In other words, not that we judge the impact of the signs. So, for example, we have looked at projects where the signs face residential areas. And, you know, we get the opportunity to see, I'm not asking for a detail sign, just where it is, roughly the sign, size, that kind of thing. If we, as a planning commission, wanted to see that included in submittals,
Yeah, we could just add it to the submittal checklist.
so that's where it should be, not in the zoning code at all?
Needs to be in there now.
Got it.
So that's fine.
Asia.
I just have one quick question. Are all in this, is it addressed in this code that have any business with a sign? Does every business need a sign, or is that up to the business?
Oh, does it require you to have a sign?
Yeah.
It doesn't require you to have a sign.
Okay.
It just, it gives you a process, and then sizes and that type of thing if you're going to have one. We do have some businesses in town that don't have signs.
Yeah.
It sounds kind of odd, but we do have some that are just basically, they're offices for folks, and I think they might have a name in a window, you know, that's like in gold lettering or something, and that's it. So you'd have
Well,
to
I
know what they were.
Yeah, and just how that's come up with past new business projects, so
Yeah.
didn't know if that was something worth
And Scott, I don't want to bring this up, but I have to, because you said we have some businesses in town that have no signs. Do we have any motels in town that have no signs? Please.
That's a good question, Commissioner Rodriguez. Not that I'm aware of. Normally they like to advertise themselves at least a little.
Because I wanted to know if I lived in Morro Bay and I wanted to stay in a motel, but I didn't know it was there because it didn't have a sign, how am I going to make a reservation?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, it's all online, but I agree. And even if we had determined that that was a vacation rental, and I did do more investigating on all of that, hopefully once we get this all passed, vacation rentals are required to have signage. that says they are a vacation rental. It is supposed to be
They
posted
are all
with the contact information, and I don't know if it's out there where it's supposed to be on the street.
They all are all required to. We are at the end phase of hiring our new building inspector / code enforcement officer. That is the kickoff to doing the inspections of all of the things that are required by the short-term rental code, doing all the, the proactive enforcement, like, driving by those locations, making sure that they have the signage, and that type of thing. And then we do the other piece of it where we pay for a service that mines vacation rentals. We identify the ones that are operating illegally and then, contact them, that type of thing.
Okay. All right, it's late, 9:17. We have 4 more items, or three more, 8, 9, and 10.
Yeah.
I'm going to suggest we hold it to the next meeting.
I'm thinking since
And I also want to do that to make sure that
Yeah.
we have more public input.
Right, people are getting tired. So, I would like to give an opportunity, though, for those people who have been here to go ahead and give public comment on any of those last 3 items, just so they have that time. They're here, they've been staying here
How about any items?
And, okay, sure.
Right, I mean-
Anything.
that
Zoning
might be-
code related,
Yeah.
let's not hear about, I don't know what.
Yeah.
Welcome.
I have an item, and I don't know how it falls within your top 10, so I was waiting patiently, hoping it would
Yeah,
fall among your top
thank you.
10. Following along the same lines as the design district conversation that you had, I want to point your attention to what is currently in the code as the Beach Street overlay in the district that is right next to us. So I'm going to follow up with an email with actually a report that I've prepared. My name is Mania Bedikian. I'm an architect, and I've been mandated by the owner of 1149 Market Street, the Sun Bulletin Building, to review the draft zoning as it applies to the property mentioned above. I've reviewed the current zoning code, the proposed draft. I've compared the authorized uses under C2 with the Beach Street specific plan, with the proposed uses under the community commercial, and comparing the current and the proposed uses with the visitor serving commercial and with the waterfront and harbor area districts that you've developed. So the main conclusion I've come to is that the proposed uses under the community commercial does not take into account the resiliency and versatility of the location that specific location has to offer for the city of Morro Bay. Historically unique sector of town, and its uniqueness and diversity is currently protected under the Beach Street specific plan. And all of this just under blanket of community commercial is about to end. So the effects on the owner are quite significant, and that will be detailed more. So three or four points here to support the statement. Community commercial is somewhat of a downsizing from C2 with the Beach Street overlay, introducing certain uses that are already very saturated in Morro Bay, like to list a few. I took the most random ones: Fortune Palm card reader, social services, emergency shelter, social services facilities, etc. You're giving the neighbors of that district the visitor serving commercial designation, which addresses a lot of high demand, high return uses that are not authorized under C community commercial. And you are also taking away functions that are protected under the Beach Street overlay and giving them to the waterfront and harbor district. For example, fish processing was one of them. And all of this just causes a general prejudice. So these are all protected by the Beach Street specific plan. And so the city should protect the current zoning, but also allow the 1149 Market Street property and its adjacent properties already to operate under the uses of its neighbors as well. So it's really an idea of an overlay for this district. What is already there, it's just a finer grain look. It's not the blanket community commercial isn't really the best. So the 1149 Market is entitled to maintain all the rights to do what local, regional, highest and best interests are that honors the reality of this industrial eclectic neighborhood. And a vibrant, resilient city will allow and protect the cohabitation of dysfunctions in such a unique neighborhood.
Thank you so much. Would you, have you sent that already?
No,
Okay. Would you?
At the end of the work week.
Okay, totally get that.
I've already started a draft
Yeah,
of this in a report.
if you would send it to all of us, that would be great.
And I have a comparative
Appreciate those
table
comments.
that I've made.
Sure.
Of all these different things, the way the information is currently presented in the current plan, and the designations, obviously, as you know, you've been working on this, is so different in language. And there's a lot of language already present, a lot of documents that have collided in one report.
Yeah, thank you for that. All right. Any other final comments, questions? So bring it back to the, yes. Oh, on Zoom, is there anybody else waiting? Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Chair Stewart. Currently, I do not see any raised hands in the queue.
Perfect, okay. So close public comment. Homework for, Scott, will we be able to schedule this in 2 weeks? Do we have time for then? Can Martha come?
Oh, yeah, it's technically 3 weeks because there's.
3 weeks,
there's
right.
5, there's an extra
Right,
Tuesday.
right,
this month.
right. That'd be the first Tuesday in September.
Okay, yeah, it sounds like we can probably make
Okay.
that happen.
So we will plan on that. We will finish these various areas. I would encourage commissioners, if you haven't already had the chance, and I know a lot of it came in late, review the public comment that came in via email, because there are some things brought up in there that are not in the top 10. And so I think we will want to take a closer look at those and address those public concerns.
Well,
and
I think there
whatever.
might actually be a David Letterman second top 10.
Yeah.
So by the time we go through
Yeah,
it, so,
yeah. So
but we could come prepared with that.
Yeah, I think that would be great, or maybe even, you know, as what we see as these next community issues coming up, go ahead and forward those prior to the meeting to Scott, so.
We would need that way ahead of. the
Way
meeting
ahead, yeah.
In order to make
Yeah.
the agenda, so
Yeah.
if you're interested in having us do something along those lines, happy to, but we need to get this
Yeah,
stuff pretty quick.
I would think probably by the beginning of next week.
Yeah.
I mean, we should be able to, because it's not reading the whole zoning code, you know, it's reading these comments and sort of pulling out. The other thing, some of the comments did a great job of adding in the references to the code, and so you can go through it line by line. It's really helpful, but they did make some very thoughtful comments, I felt, and questions and so on. So, yeah, if we can respect that in the community.
And what's our due date on that stuff, Scott? Next Monday, Tuesday?
It'll be good to have at the beginning of next week.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Monday.
latest
End
Monday?
of business Monday would be,
Okay,
yeah.
And if for some reason you don't hear from a planning commissioner, then that's, their chance is over, right? That's
Well, your
their
chance isn't over with, we're gonna have another meeting.
Yeah, but what I'm
It's-
saying is you want,
we're not
you're gonna go
have-
with
we're
what
not
you
gonna
get.
have written it up.
It won't be on the agenda.
Yeah, it
you'll
won't be.
get a bad grade.
You can speak about anything you want during the process,
Yeah.
it's just, it won't be
Yeah.
in our staff report, basically.
Okay,
Right.
good, all right.
Right.
Well, and the other, one problem with that too is we're going to continue to get comments, I'm thinking, right up to the meeting. So we're going to have to adjust that anyway.
Correct, yeah, I mean, it's, we
That's
keep saying it, it's an
process.
iterative process, and that's kind of what we're doing.
That's how
so.
you.
But it would be
Iterate.
super nice to be able to get through it and make whatever adjustments we make, and at the end of the meeting in 3 weeks.
I would like a motion for continuance.
So, who?
Motion to continue?
Thank you. Second? Asia?
Please, yes.
All right.
To a date certain, because we're going to continue.
To a date certain, we will continue it to
September 6th?
September 6th.
Yeah, September,
Ah,
correct.
got it.
Can I ask a question of Martha?
You may ask a question of Martha.
Martha, by the way, an excellent report. But I got an interesting email by a gentleman who was, with respect to the design guidelines, was calling attention to some of the ambiguous words, consistency,
Yes.
appropriate. And, you know, I have a feeling that it's well-intentioned, but he was advising that we try to add some definition to those words. I'm guessing that that's a very difficult process Do you have any thoughts on how practical it would be to put some heft into those ambiguous words?
So the section that he was referring to was actually part of the discretionary process. So those actually are subjective because that's where you're weighing kind of the merits and you're making that decision. If everything was objective, you wouldn't need to be involved. So the standards are objective. What he was referring to was the criteria by which design review is conducted, so that they are intentionally subjective.
Okay, very good.
And we are developing objective design standards. We're in the process of doing that right now for things that require it. So you will be seeing something along those lines. As a standalone document, I'm not going to put it into the code. It's something that can be updated and you know, kind of lives over time based on, quite frankly, state law and its ever-changing nature related to housing.
Yep.
So.
Okay, let's go quickly through the rest of this. No new businesses listed.
So we got.
Oh, yeah, sorry, you should call the.
We had a motion and
a motion, second was Asia.
Second was Asia, okay.
Motion
Commissioner
was Mike.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Commissioner King?
Yes.
Commissioner Garafia?
Yes.
Vice Chair Roshan?
Yes.
Chairperson Stewart?
Yes.
All right,
Okay,
motion
okay.
passes 5-0, thank you.
Whew, now we can, there's nothing under new business, nothing under unfinished business.
Yes,
although there's
unfinished business.
Always unfinished business.
We need to wrap up the public benefits memo. Remember, we are going to be finalizing and hopefully moving up the public benefits memo we presented almost 3 months ago, Joe.
Excellent.
So, no, but you
Did you
have
get all the input you needed?
If
or-
we got it, oh,
Okay, mine was in.
Well, and aren't you in the process? I mean, I know Commissioner Garafia has reached out to at least the Public Works Advisory Board about, you know, getting.
Right, so I didn't think that was premature. I had actually, I sent the report and the revised report that we did and the menu list and a few thoughts of my own. And I sent it to what I thought were each of the chairmen of the advisory committees. I did get a response from the Public Works. I have not heard from the other ones yet, but I was careful in the letter to say, you know, you're not obligated in any sense. It's only if you feel like you want to contribute some input to it. So,
okay.
So that's where we stand.
because I think at our last meeting, we were on 90 days. We were going to do this within 30 days, so we've gone to 90 days. So do we want to put a date certain on that, Joe, as far as like when do we want to wrap the public benefits, feedback up? That way we can forward this to the council, because we need to get that up there.
Right. Let's see, what the Public Works Committee told me their next meeting is tomorrow.
Okay.
And it's on the agenda for the meeting after that, which is sometime in the middle of next month, I guess. So I could send another letter to some of the other committees just to confirm that we're facing a deadline and if they'd like to respond by sometime before the next time we meet.
I would make sure you're sending the correspondence to maybe the chair and the department director and not the commission itself, because it creates Brown Act issues.
I was sending it to the chairs, I thought.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just pointing that out. It can create issues if they start talking back to you.
I would do the department director as well. just to keep them in the
Joe, since we're meeting in 3 weeks, you're doing that part of it. We're the subcommittee, so go ahead and go for it. And in 3 weeks, hopefully we can talk about it again.
Right.
As unfinished business and get it up as soon as possible. But let's see what happens in 3 weeks.
Yeah, okay. maybe I'll send a copy of my email just to make sure that I sent it to the right people.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Happy to help.
Planning Commissioner comments, future agenda items, anything anybody want to add at this point?
Only a quick thank you to the public input we got on this issue. I thought it was really exceptional, and thank you for the last people to leave. I always like that you're here. And I do think we need a big thank you to staff for staying late, and I think you really prepared us. The top 10 list really helped.
Excellent,
Yeah.
excellent. And Martha, thank you.
All right, Community Development Director comments.
I've spoken enough this evening. I don't have anything else for you.
You never talk enough. All right, then we will adjourn. Our next meeting will be September 6th in person here at 6 o'clock at the Vets Hall. Thank you, everybody. Thanks so much.